So my girlfriend and I went to the trampoline park this week, which we're really looking forward to. Last week we went to the planetarium. We were so hyped for it. Had a great time. We're just like, what fun shit is there to do around? We went to the trampoline park. I was posting on Instagram about it. I was like, it's bounce day. It's bounce day with loads of different pictures of shit on my way there. Get to there. It's like, it's the trampoline park. It's bounce time. About 10 minutes in, my girlfriend turned to me and she was like, these two are lined up like this, so I can do this, and jumped and just immediately slipped and sprained her knee. Um,
Ouch.
she said, "Hey, watch this," and then got an accident emergency visit. I genuinely was a bit relieved after a couple minutes of like seeing how she was doing, because like my immediate thought was, I don't know if anyone else had this, but at some young age I was exposed on the early internet. I was exposed to how pictures of how bad trampoline accidents can be. Does anyone else know this? Like,
What?
trampolines are crazy dangerous.
Oh, the springs are like so dangerous.
And they can really,
Yeah.
really seriously fuck you up. And maybe I actually was shown some fake fucked up shit and it's just stuck in my head. But I was incredibly worried about like getting a very serious injury going to just like bounce around, do stupid shit. And then like my girlfriend fell over and then she was clearly in pain. And I rushed over and I was thinking of all these fucking absolute like horror images.
Oh no. That's like the rotten.com of your generation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Pictures of trampoline accidents.
Yeah, we had like people getting pulled apart by tanks in the Middle East somewhere, and
Yeah.
you had the trampoline accident trauma. Jesus Christ! Welcome to Red Planet, everyone.
Welcome to
What
Red
we
Planet.
And we're gonna kick off. We're gonna do the same thing we do every week. What is the most base thing you did in the last couple of weeks? We've not been live for a week or two. I'm gonna choose Tim.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been out of town. I've been taking care of my partner. So I guess like, I mean, for the last couple of weeks, solidly. So I guess that's it. You know, I think taking care of people and you know, even in a casual way is important. But yeah, no, I haven't been here on the stream, and I took a couple weeks off work to help out and do everything. And yeah, it was good. It's very rewarding. But yeah, nothing as extreme as I'm sure Mule's probably about to be like.
I
You
know
know,
some of
like,
Mules, and it's
we
pretty
held-
fucking good, actually.
Yeah. Like I'm
No, it's
gonna
actually
guess
pretty
there was
good.
there was a attempted eviction, but
I don't know
they
if you
staged
noticed,
a mass
the UK actually
sit-in
became
and
communist this week. It was Mules.
yeah. I was
Yeah.
gonna say, and this was a springboard into the wider socialist revolution in the British Isles. Kneecap were there.
Yeah,
So I guess
that's right.
yeah. But yeah, no, seriously, what were you up to recently, Neil? What have you been up to?
Okay. Yeah.
Just
No,
give it.
I'm just gonna.
Start with some chill ones. You know, like you can get into the big stuff later.
Okay, that's a good way to do it, actually. Yeah. So I guess like one of the most basic things I did recently was literally today. I went down to Gaskell Garden Project, comrades that we had on, comrades of the show. Dan and T-Rob came on that one time to talk about things like gleaning and food sovereignty and all that stuff. Really good. Was down there doing some gardening today, some mulching. Just doing some raking up of some leaves and then putting all the dead leaves, because it's autumn now, just all amongst the flowers and the crops and everything that they're growing in Gaskell Garden Projects. And it's really good. Like, you know, every time you go down, like, you know, Dan and one of the other comrades there, Colin, is, you know, talking to you about like, oh well, this plant does this and this plant does this. And borage is one that I've learned now. Borage, it sounds like Boris and porridge.
Oh yeah.
They
That
told
was
us
like
about
one of
porridge
the-
when they were on the
Yeah,
show.
yeah.
They were
I was
going on
gonna
about
say,
borage.
Borage was the big one. Borage
It was a big
like,
one.
Yeah.
They love borage, and like, so I know about
Fully
borage. I know
borage
what that.
filled.
Yeah, I know what that looks like. I know kind of what it is. I know kind of what it does. And yeah, so just like putting like all the mulch amongst stuff, and then there were some other people doing things like taking up pallets and getting wood off them to build a shed. It was a really nice wholesome day, and we had like fresh rocket from the farm and fresh radish from the farm. It was like lovely. I was like chopping up these radishes. They all look like dicks. Like they look like they were like one of my comrades was harvesting them, and she was just like these all just look like dicks. And I was like, yep, penis radishes. So yeah, chopping them up, that was good. And then what was the other one? Yeah, so then another thing that I did, I've been sort of like getting more into resisting deportations organizations recently because like obviously it's a really important thing. And one of them hit us up at GMTU for a phone for a refugee from Gaza, and basically, yeah, just was like, fuck yeah, I've got an old iPhone in my thing, and just charged it up, made sure I'd cleared it off, and then boom, just gave it to one of my comrades. And then the other thing that I did was the other night we had an anti-raid alert come up, and it was like there were cops on a road in Manchester called Oxford Road, which is like the main thoroughfare. There's like loads of fucking restaurants, buses. It's it's a really busy route. And there was just about 20 cops just like checking Deliveroo drivers, like e-courier drivers from every sort of, if you were brown and like wearing a fucking food bag on your back, you were getting stopped basically. And they were obviously using it as an excuse to check like for immigration papers and stuff. There was an immigration van there. And we were thinking it was just me and two comrades who were there initially, and it was like there's way too many cops, like they're just gonna fucking put us away or something. We have to figure out like a way to actually do something about this. And so what we did was we walked around to all the spots where we knew delivery drivers, like e-courier drivers, like congregate, and we just told as many of them as possible, and we were like, have you got your WhatsApp chat for your company's riders and all that? Tell them in there. Do you know what I mean? Like tell them in that WhatsApp group. If you got a WhatsApp group, tell your friends, tell everyone you see. Cops on Oxford Road, don't go down there. Because they were basically saying like, oh, is your e-bike, you got a license for that e-bike, mate? You know what I mean? Shit like that. Like checking their e-bikes are up to standard.
It's like a lot of people, people with precarious migration status who are working as delivery riders, like are also in like housing with a lot of other people who like there are a lot of like
Absolutely.
There was an e-bike fire on the news this week, and it was like someone had died in it, and it was like an 18 bed HMO, but like it wasn't licensed for that, and like so they're suing the landlord as well as the bike manufacturer. And like I was just thinking how like although they're so precariously positioned, like so many of those riders are in contact with each other. If they like were to like organize and put those kind of like contact networks to this exact kind of use, like
yeah. Well, one of the guys. Actually, that's not the first time that's happened. By the way, that this happened like about a year ago as well. A fire in an overcrowded rental apartment where there was just a bunch of e-courier drivers and migrants who've just got like the shit sorted and like starting to work and stuff. But also one of the guys like came up to us and he was like, "Oh shit! Like they've already taken 2 bikes off me." And it's like they're just taking these people's means of living and existing in this country. And the cracked thing about it, the really cracked thing about it, is that this legislation for e-bikes has like come in so fast that they're using to like as a power to like search and stuff. And there's been legislation for fucking decades that sat there for decades that was about good stuff, and it's just like never gets done, never gets written. All of a sudden, as soon as there's like migrants using fucking e-bikes to earn a living, e-bike legislation gets pushed through in like 3 years or something. It's like, okay, I get it. So yeah, it's completely fucked. But other than that, GMTU stuff, no huge eviction resistances to change the world and bring forth liberation-based communism in the UK. Unfortunately, that's not happened. But GMTU have had a big strategy away day. We're doing our strategy for 2025, 2025 to 2030, basically a five-year plan. Some people call it. It's just like really fucking really good. The ideas that were around that table, there was like 20 of us all on the committee and just making all these decisions, and it's all people that have like you know, I've seen progress in the way that they feel confident to like talk about what they want to see in our union, use their voice in like the membership and stuff. It was just like an incredibly good day with such good ideas coming out of it. And yeah, the strategy obviously has to remain confidential at this point, but you know, it will be very good, and you'll hear about it as soon as we put it out there. But yeah, very, very exciting stuff. So Sophie, it's your turn now. Tell us what amazing based stuff you've done this week.
Well, I actually did make communism in the UK this week, so it's kind of, I mean, I was going to credit you, but like, you didn't take the credit. But
Are you saying you were the
I was trying to
hand off. It was a singular effort,
but it was just me.
It's not a combined effort. The big communism builder.
It was just me. Well, everyone's mad at the communism that I made, but which is understandable because, you know, like women, whatever. I get it, but anyway, so it seems like everyone's unhappy, and we're going to go back to neoliberal capitalism next week. But I did do it. No. So what have I been up to? We're going to have a bit of this in the news. There was a protest outside the Old Bailey, which is an old court in London, if people don't know, by the family of Chris Kaba and like Black Lives Matter supporters, people who'd like heard about it. There was an emergency protest because the cop who killed Chris Kaba was found not guilty. I think Mule has a news piece covering it. Basically, I went along, and the speeches were fantastic. They were very focused on like, let's do everything we can to get people into the movement for broader justice around this right now. Like, it wasn't, not to say that they were saying this is what they expected, so it's fine. Like, it was a harrowing time for them. They talked about how they'd had to watch like the footage of their family member being executed by the state over and over and over again. Their lawyer had advised them to like not show too much emotion, and they were just talking about like having to like stay calm so they seem reasonable to the jury while they're watching their loved one die, like over and over again. And then like they get this verdict, right? It's absolutely horrifying, but they were really focused on like getting people into a movement for broader justice for like people who have died because of the state in some way. So their focus was on getting people to come down to the UFFC march, which was yesterday. There was a massive march in London for the United Families and Friends Coalition, which is this protest organization for like families and friends of people who have died in state custody, whether that's at the police, the prisons, psychiatric wards. And it was their 25th anniversary march this year because like they've been doing this for such a long time. Anyway, so I went along to that, and one of the speakers said to the crowd, please get on social media and make videos specifically. Those are the most, those are the thing that can get the most reach. I encourage people to get down to the march and take part and also join the movement in a wider way. So I thought, I know someone with a YouTube channel. Actually, she lives in my house. I'll get her to do it. And so the next day I made a video, and I don't know what effect it had. I did not go to the march because I'd already arranged to go up to see Mule this weekend, which didn't happen because the day before that, we went to the trampoline park, and you know what happened there. So the other base thing I've been doing is for the last few days, I've been taking care of my girlfriend. She's going to be okay in a few days. She's just got to crutch around for a little bit, sprained her knee quite badly. And I would like to second Tim's taking care of people, even in a somewhat casual way, is actually very based and very important. That's been my last couple of weeks. But we want to know what based things you've been doing. You can message us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout it out in a later episode.
And now, Sophie,
yes,
do you want to tell us about the call to action that's going around?
Yes, from call to action to call to action. This one isn't ours. This one is from Rise Up for Rojava. So if it was been going around a bit on social media this week, I think it's just important for us to include it in the podcast to share it more widely. The Rise Up for Rojava network published the following statement this week. Last night, on 23rd of October 2024, the fascist forces of the Turkish state began an intense bombing attack on the countryside, villages, and cities of northeast Syria. The center of the latest attacks was Rojava, but also Sengal and the mountains of southern Kurdistan were targeted. Again, people woke to the sound of bombs falling around them, while workers found themselves risking their lives to continue producing vital supplies for the people. Some civilians and workers have already been martyred and more badly injured. The strikes of the drones destroyed bakeries, petrol and electricity stations, centers of the ISIS, it says here, internal defense forces, were also another main target, in which already several members of the ISIS forces were martyred. Turkey is putting all people of northeast Syria under siege. Destroying services belonging to the sustainability of society shows a clear attack on the achievements of the people to be self-organized. The role of the states in states in Europe like Germany, Britain, Spain, and Italy is clear. All states supply Turkey with the weapons it uses to then attack northeast Syria and the revolutionary society there. Their intention is not only to expand the support of Turkey, as shown by recent discussions between all 5 states to send Eurofighter jets made by Airbus, BAE Systems, and Leonardo from Europe to Turkey. These most recent attacks come just over a year after those of last year. In October 2023, Turkey began bombing critical civilian infrastructures. The attacks did not stop until January 2024. To stop the attacks and stand with the people of northeast Syria in the defense of democratic and equal life and system that is built up there, we must give a strong response by fighting together and putting enough pressure on the Turkish state to make it politically impossible for them to make further attacks. To do this, we must organize. Join local actions and organize your own. This is fundamental to make others aware of the reality of people here to influence the states and companies complicit in the attacks. We call on our friends and allies to join us on the streets. Together, we will stop the attacks on northeast Syria and defend our revolution. We had Alexis de Loomis, who made Belkaceb on the show a few weeks ago. It was a fantastic interview, and it's a fantastic film. If you can arrange, if you can make it to a screening of it, or you can arrange Alexis to come and screen it, or just for him to send you the film for you to screen it yourself and show it to people, it's amazing, and hopefully soon will be available more broadly. It's about the Syrian revolution and defeating Daesh to be able to claim the autonomous northeastern administration. I forget the correct order that the acronym goes in, but yeah, the Syrian revolution. And if you can, if you want to share this, look up Rise Up for Rojava and share their shout out, and then look for any organizations you can join, the opportunities for organizing. I think that it's very clear they've named Airbus, BAE Systems, and Leonardo because they're hoping for people to organize in the ways that people have organized to stop the supply of machines of death to these kinds of regimes, as we've seen in Palestine. So everyone at Red Planet wishes the Turkish state a very collapse immediately and sends our solidarity to the Syrian forces resisting Turkish fascism and to everyone organizing to support their struggle. But Mule, you are going to tell us about Mr. Beast.
Oh boy, I'm going to tell you about Mr. Beast. Hacker puts up Death to Israel, sponsored by Mr. Beast LLC on billboards in Chicago and Canada. I'm so glad you gave me this story. On October the 17th, on October the 17th, Palestine flag billboards appeared in Chicago and multiple places in Canada with slogans like Death to Israel and the smaller text, paid for by Mr. Beast LLC. One billboard featured the face of the popular YouTuber as if he were in a YouTube thumbnail next to the words "fuck Israel." It's really good, and you should go and look at this if you haven't already. Many people couldn't believe the billboards were real at first, but as more people took and shared pictures, the billboards were spread on social media widely. Shortly afterward, it became apparent that Mr. Beast had not been involved in the placement of these billboards, but rather it had been a product of a hack by unknown parties. So really, really cool stuff. You know, we're big on hacktivism here at Red Planet. You know, you can do activism from wherever you are in the world. Whatever your capability is, there's a place for you in the revolution. And oh boy, there's way more, in my opinion, there's way more openings for this kind of stuff. Please do more stuff like this. This is great to hear about and see. So, investigative reporter Ryan Fay got in touch with the individual behind it for interview. The unidentified hacker said they'd use a tool called Zoom Eye to find billboards that were not secured by login credentials and upload their designs in place of the usual adverts. They also said they had no idea where billboards would appear until they were posted about on social media, counter to claims that they had deliberately put one near a majority Jewish neighborhood. The Mr. Beast connection, according to the interview, was just a last-minute addition. They said, I was trying to... I've not read this, so I don't know the details. That's why I'm laughing.
This is the shitpostiest detail in the whole story.
Yeah, that's why I'm laughing. I'm not just being unprofessional. They said I was trying to find a font and I saw Kamika Axis, the Mr. Beast font. Finally, in the interview, it's so good. Finally, in the interview with Ryan Fay, the hacker added, "Free Palestine and trans rights are human rights." Fay also said that they greeted the now defunct group Sieged Sec, the gay furry hackers that hacked the Heritage Foundation in July, saying that their activism should be recognized much more than this billboard. Very, very nice.
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
I mean, I think that's true, right? Like, getting information out there to people is actually a bigger deal than, like, this is a prank, but like, I like that they're pointing people back to more hacktivism and more stuff that like leftist hackers have done.
Absolutely. So Tim, tell us about the UTAW and what they've said this week.
All right, so the UTAW, or the United Tech and Allied Workers Union, so they stood together this week for Congo Week, which is a solidarity week with Congolese miners. Obviously, because the tech industry runs on the resources that are mined in the Congo, right? All the cobalt and stuff like that ends up in your iPhones, computers, all this kind of stuff. So they put out a statement basically saying, "Oh wait, I'll bring it up here. We'll take a look." So they said, this is from their Instagram. "This week is Congo Week, with the theme Breaking the Silence. As tech workers, we recognize our role in an industry that exploits those at the start of the supply chain. We stand in solidarity with miners in the DRC and their communities. The demand for minerals should never come at the expense of human rights or environmental health. We call on our industry to critically engage with their supply chains, prioritize miners, and uphold workers' rights. Together, let's break the silence and advocate for a more just and equitable future." So I think that's dope, because it's like, it encompasses not just like the environmental issues and all this kind of stuff, but it's saying like, we are a group of workers, and we are standing in solidarity with these workers, even though they aren't a member of our group. They're on the other side of the planet, but we see them as workers, as part of what we do as well. Obviously, there's the link in the product, but because I mean, these are like, anyone that, if you've taken a minute to look into the history of Congo and the kind of like extractive industries and kind of colonial kind of fuckery that has happened there over the years, it's like, basically from the moment Westerners set foot in Congo, they've been like literally like enslaving the people and extracting as much resources and wealth as they could out of it.
It's a history of pure evil, genuinely.
Yeah, it's like genuinely evil, like so bad, like from King Leopold onwards through, there's like been various dictatorships that have been propped up by, Western powers as well, just to, keep the spice flowing. But yeah, so UTAW have, they've got this Congo Week going on, which is like, yeah, I think it's amazing to link those, because a lot of people always, it's like a meme, they're like, a communist on an iPhone,
right?
Like all that kind of shit. And I think it's like, so it's really important to, to recognize these links and be like, oh yeah, well, like, like we're living in a world where most of us in the Imperial Core are like pretty dependent on these things. There's a lot of people that can't even do their jobs or do anything like that. Even like accessing social services, a lot of the time these days, you do need some kind of like phone or computer.
Literally, yeah.
So it's like the least that you can do is to like stand in solidarity with these workers. But
I mean, I think
yeah,
I think if you're looking at the supply chain, like it would be interesting if it would be cool if people also looked at where workers are involved in like the manufacture of stuff, because it's often like the
mm,
stuff is extracted and then it's refined in a different country than
yeah,
where it's extracted, and then it's removed from there to be like turned into the parts for computers somewhere else, and then and actually assembled somewhere else from that. And it's like there are exploited people at every step in this chain, and I feel like
yeah,
oppressed people need to look out for opportunities for other, like solidarity with other oppressed people in every way that their like lives intersect. Like I was thinking this about
Mm.
I was recently thinking about this about medical tourism and trans people. Like, there's actually a lot of
mm,
countries where like medical tourism brings people to, like,
yeah,
I had surgery in Armenia. I talked about it a bit on the
hmm,
show. Like, I just think there's there's intersections
yeah,
where like people don't usually think about it, and they should try to, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know if
yeah,
we watched
absolutely.
Nay Passaran as part of a Red Planet thing, but that's what is highlighted in Nay Passaran, right? Like those workers in that factory knew that what they were making was actively contributing to the harm of
Yeah, yeah.
people
Exactly.
in
And this
Chile.
is what,
Yeah.
yeah, we're seeing with a lot of other, like we're seeing like the dock workers refusing to load or unload goods bound for Israel. And there's like a lot of stuff like this that is happening at the moment. I think I mean it's something that's always happened, but I think that there has been, there's also been like kind of a disconnect with there is kind of like an attitude where it's like the problems of the imperial periphery, or like the global south and stuff, are almost untouchable to like the average worker or whatever like that. But then it's like,
This is genuinely why I
yeah,
hate UBI discourse. Like, people are
oh yeah,
talking about like they're basically like, we can finish it. We can just like we are this close to like
mm,
everything just being fine for us. And I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
what about the rest of the planet? Like, where's your
yeah,
class
yeah.
analysis? Like, you have
Well,
to be an
yeah,
internationalist.
that's like that thing, like where people go like, oh, well, we can just do like democratic socialism like those Scandinavian countries. And it's like, oh yeah, but that's built on, years and years of imperialism and colonization. That wealth doesn't just like come out of nowhere, like yeah, that's like, yeah, building a, if you've got like this gigantic tower of all these people holding it up, and then just this like palace on top is like,
Like,
you know
the UN's like development pathway thing, where it thinks that every country should go through the same phases of development as
oh
like
yeah,
rich
like the
countries. It's
like
like,
the Age of Empires tech tree, where it's
yeah,
like you go
literally, like you should
like,
industrialize and then you should deindustrialize. And it's like,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
we had like we did that because we were beneficiaries of imperialism and colonialism and slavery. Like,
mm,
there is not one single pathway to communism,
yeah,
but every pathway needs to be accessible to as many
yeah,
countries as possible. It can't just be that like your country gets communism because it's imperialist.
yeah, 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 absolutely. But yeah, so a lot of the focus of the UTAW protest has been about, like they mentioned in their statement, about breaking the silence and getting the tech industry to acknowledge and be educated on the imperialist and ecologically destructive supply chain that it depends on. So yeah, they've got a call to action for, there's like a bunch of things that they want people to do, like contact representatives, join in on any kind of like local um, protests or groups, and yeah, just generally get educated, donate, and yeah, and stand in solidarity with for this one in particular, the workers in the Congo. But I would say in any industry that you work in, or anything that you're involved in, even if it's a hobby or something like that, it's probably worthwhile to look into seeing yeah, with like what Soph was saying about, there are these things that we can depend on, and there are complex relationships with how like the things that we either rely on or enjoy can be linked to some pretty gnarly stuff that maybe is sometimes behind a little curtain, sometimes not. So yeah. So why don't we move on? And Soph, why don't you tell us a little bit about, well, speaking of what we are just talking about the dock workers in Greece and the
Exactly.
Israeli arms shipment. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So what we've done is there are always a bunch of different Palestine stories, and I can't explain the exact calculation we've done in putting these all together and other ones separately, but like we have rounded up several Palestine stories together to run through different things going on this week, just so that we can like break the news a bit differently. So first off, we have Greek dock workers shut down an Israeli arms shipment. UK police raid home of pro-Palestinian journalist. Anti-Zionism could now become a protected belief for UK academics. And then, of course, as well, we've all seen further horrific massacres, war crimes, unthinkable evil from Israel this week. But the main discussion topic of the show this week will be about the year of genocide. So we will be discussing this plenty. First up, Greek dock workers have shut down a shipment of bullets intended for Israel in the port of Piraeus, run largely by shipping corporation Costco. It's not Costco like the American superstore, it's Costco. So I've got a quote here from Marcos Bekris, president of the union ENEDEP, and the Piraeus Labor Center. He said, "We make it clear that any other effort that will be made by the government, by Costco, or anyone who wants to paint his hands with blood will not have the workers aggregate," which is very powerful. I actually think I first saw this on Instagram. I follow a Radical Graffiti account, and they were showing the workers like actually like tagging the shipping containers with the union acronym, which I thought was kind of fun. Like, you know, just like spray painting on that they're like, you know, the unions shut this down. Yeah, so Beckress also called on the working class of Piraeus, the youth unions and institutions to gather at the entrance of Costco to protest what they were doing. Next up, we have Asa Winstanley, journalist at the Electronic Intifada, had his home raided on Thursday, 17th of October. According to police who raided his home, it was for his social media posts. We have Mule. I literally sent you a voice message about this. It was weeks ago. Starmer had just come in, and some old racist was being arrested because he made bad posts on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I was just immediately like, I don't want to sound like I'm making a slippery slope argument, but big comma, big but, these powers will be used against the left, and they'll be used for more meaningful shit than like racist grandpa, you know? Like, get your dad off the internet is one thing, but like shutting down the trying to shut down the Electronic Intifada is something else. This is shutting down the freedom of the press. And it was like racist grandpa, and then a week later, or it might have been in the same week, like there were Just Up Oil protesters who had been like, they were arrested for conspiracy because they were planning something. Like they were planning an action. And
peaceful action.
Yeah, literally, like just shutting down every avenue of dissent because Starmer is a cop, and he's just brought in a cop government full of cops and people who love cops for a base of people who love cops. Right. According to Electronic Intifada, quote, a letter addressed to Winstanley from the Counter-Terrorism Command of the Met Police Service indicates that the authorities are, quote, aware of your profession as a journalist, but that, quote, notwithstanding police are investigating possible offences, end quote, under sections 1 and 2 of the Terrorism Act 2006. These provisions set out the purported offence of encouragement of terrorism. The Electronic Intifada was founded in February 2001 by Ali Abunimah, an American citizen of Palestinian descent, Arjan El Fased, a human rights activist based in the Netherlands, Laurie King, an anthropologist and former coordinator of the International Campaign for Justice for the Victims of Sabra and Shatila, and the managing editor of the Journal of Palestine Studies in Washington, and Nigel Parry. The publication has consistently and doggedly supported the cause of Palestinian liberation over the last 23 years, breaking stories of Zionist fascism to an imperial core audience that would not have heard such truths via our mainstream media. Although his devices were seized, Winstanley was not arrested and has not been charged with any offense. Yeah, it's horrifying, and I don't know totally what to say about it, except I suppose all I've said so far is just kind of an I told you so, but like it just like it was just so obvious as soon as just like someone's being arrested because he's made racist posts, but it's just like this is an overreach of police powers. Like, this isn't better, actually.
The thing that I was thinking of when I was writing this up was Electronic Intifada is based in Chicago. And in Chicago, they have First Amendment rights, so you can't just get like put away for having a radio show that says even if it's like mental stuff, you just can't get put away for it.
There's so many Americans that it's like if they were in the UK or New Zealand or Australia or whatever, like they would.
Day one,
like
yeah, and it's so funny because it comes back to that same thing of like. You know, we're seeing this again and again. It's the name of the show, Red Planet, but like this is why internationalism is so important and connections with international comrades is so important because if, you know, your part of the operation dies in the UK, then it can continue elsewhere. You know, it cannot be killed in any meaningful way, kind of thing. You know, that's what we have to remember, and that's
be networked and spread far and wide.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what this will amount to. You know, it's the police under Starmer's government being like, oh yeah, let's get this guy. He's a crusty and he's posting about Palestine, and then you know, ultimately, it will have no effect on the Electronic Intifada. It will lose out on Asa Winstanley's amazing journalism. Really, really good. You know, he's a great contributor, but you know, again, it's like the movement will continue. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like them seizing his devices, I don't know that he'll not be able to work with Electronic Intifada anymore, but like them seizing his devices is definitely going to be them attempting to find stuff that they can like try to further shut down his career and like and yes, the Electronic Intifada if they can, but they won't be able to, I think, because like you say, it's you know it's not actually based. They're looking at Winstanley's stuff, not like he is not the operation, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, the next story we have. A UK tribunal has found belief in anti-Zionism, quote, worthy of respect after Professor David Miller was dismissed of accusations of anti-Semitism by the University of Bristol. So it's like, you've already heard this story a bunch, I feel like you know the details of this story. Some university professor is like, Israel is a genocidal terrorist state that's fucking encouraging white supremacist settler colonialism and taking part in a genocide. And the university shits its pants and says, this is anti-Semitism, what you're doing. Anyway, a tribunal found that David Miller was not being anti-Semitic, because of course he wasn't. He was just explaining anti-Zionism as a valid position. And he's been reinstated. And now Zionists are trying to paint this as like, this could be a dangerous precedent for allowing anti-Semitism. But in all seriousness, this could actually be precedent for defending anti-Zionism and stopping academics being purged from academic institutions for opposing genocide in Israel, which I think is very, very important. A crucial facet of all genocides is erasure, right? Is like the washing away of the evidence of any opposition to it, because they're trying to create like a hegemonic narrative of history that sticks and that is never questioned from now on. And it's not just like when people talk about queer people are going to get rounded up in the UK because it's so homophobic, transphobic, whatever, it's like, actually, no, they won't want to do like the project of anti-queer fascism in the UK won't want to do that. They will want to pretend we never existed at all, right? Like if they got their way completely there, their whole point is denial and erasure. Erasure is an absolutely essential part of genocidal fascistic projects. And that's true for Israel as well, right? So like them trying to leverage power to like get our educational institutions to like not even acknowledge anti-Zionism as a valid position and just call it anti-Semitism, do the same thing in all of the media. It's fucked. So it's really good to see this defended, even if it feels like a kind of trivial thing in the face of obviously mass death. It's very important that like, I don't know, maybe as an epistemologist, as someone who's like very concerned with like how we know things and what we know and how information spreads, like that it's especially important to me. But I just think that like we are in a unique, novel moment where this kind of horror is happening and being recorded more than ever before and talked about more than ever before. And that means there's a huge secondary battle going on, a struggle over what we think about what is happening right now. So hopefully it does actually set a precedent for defending anti-Zionism as, quote, worthy of respect, and could be a protected belief in future cases. Right, last story, and it's just kind of anything all the kind of horrific shit we've seen this week. There have been, I think it was this week, not last. There has been reporting from the Jabalia refugee camp of the mass graves dug, and just the horrible shit being done to groups of people. I read a particularly horrible account of where women and mothers and their children were separated and then brutalized, and when they were returned, children were returned completely randomly, and so these mothers were searching for their own children while trying to comfort a stranger's child who they don't know, who's just been through horrific shit at the hands of IDF fascists. But the other source I got here to look at is a UN observation tower and perimeter fence was deliberately demolished by an IDF bulldozer this week in Marwahin. So the UNIFIL, which is the interim force in Lebanon, reported this week that in Lebanon, the IDF have demolished in southern Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, the IDF have deliberately demolished an observation tower, which I think the IDF's attacks on the UN have been going on for so long now. It feels hard to. Okay, the UNIFIL said, yet again, we note that breaching a UN position and damaging UN assets is a flagrant violation of international law and Security Council Resolution 1701. It also endangers the safety and security of our peacekeepers in violation of international humanitarian law. And I just, what are the UN peacekeepers doing, achieving at all when there is this genocide that Israel is trying to escalate into a full regional war?
It's bizarre. The idea of a peacekeeping unit is that you're scared to attack it in case the rest of the people who support the peacekeeping unit go, actually, you're bad, you need sanctions, you need this, that, and the other.
Right.
But none of that exists for Israel.
It's wild, isn't it?
They're exempt. It's like they're the teacher's kid. It's just they can't.
I mean, I guess they are really.
They kind of
literally
a bunch of teachers all got together and raised a child, a really shitty child,
and it was the worst kid. Yeah, exactly.
Got everything it wanted.
A prefect at school, all the things last week that we were saying about Keir Starmer, all that stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just to see the UN kind of wagging their finger, oh, that's against the rules. The rules from the rules-based order. There's order based on rules. Only there isn't, right? There's not order. There's genocide, and all the rules have gone out the fucking window. I don't know. It is. I said this a little while ago, but seeing the purpose of a system is what it does, and the actions of Israel are the actions of the imperialist project. And so seeing the thing itself, right, the imperialism as an organism outpace the ideological superstructure that it's laid down so extremely, right? This puts America in conflict with the UN, because the UN already said that countries supporting Israel doing what they're doing should stop right now or be fined, I think was the thing they were wanting them with. But it's just okay, that's nothing. And I just, it feels like it very evidently can't hold. It's in such obvious conflict with itself at this stage. Organs of American imperialism like the UN are explicitly, publicly, and internationally against what America is doing in supporting Israel and what Israel is doing, the whole imperialist project. We're going to talk loads more about this with our guests.
So much coming.
Mule, why don't you tell us about the cop who killed Chris Kaba being found not guilty?
Yeah, so this is what Sophie was talking about. That's the action that she went to this week to sort of support the family and friends of people who knew Chris Kaba. Chris Kaba was from London. He was killed in 2022 in Streatham Hill by Metropolitan Police Officer Martin Blake. Kaba, now the thing is about Chris Kaba is that the newspapers love to talk about how he was charged with all these offenses in his youth. You know, it's like you right.
It doesn't
The
matter because you're
things
arguing for execution. You're arguing that the
right.
police can just shoot people to death.
Yeah, literally. That's what it's alluding to. But even if we were to throw him the bone of accepting that conversation, the stuff that Chris Kaba did as a kid is what a lot of kids that I knew growing up did, right? And a lot of them were white, and they got away with it because they were white, right? If you over police a neighborhood, which is what happens in black neighborhoods,
Crime
you will
exists where the
catch the
police are
kids doing
looking.
more stuff. Yeah, you will. You'll catch the kids doing more stuff that you won't catch white kids doing because you're not in the white neighborhoods. And that's the thing that they always love to bring up. They love to bring it up. Oh, he was doing this. He was dealing drugs. He knew people who were killing people, and this, that, and the other. And it's like everybody, probably 2 people removed, knows someone who's probably killed someone, or knows someone who's killed someone, or something. It's ridiculous to sort of like use this like. It doesn't excuse him from being murdered. Excuse the person murdering him on behalf of the state. It doesn't excuse him. So he was literally only 23 years old. He was also unarmed at the time, as is always the case when police lynch black people. A single shot was fired by Sergeant Martin Blake, through the car windscreen, and Kaba later died in hospital from the wound. Obviously, I think to save face, I think it was a sort of, because this thing does not happen. Like Mark Duggan was also executed by the police. So many different black people have been executed by the police in the UK. At the hands of the police, and there's never been a police investigation launched this quickly. I'm pretty sure they launched the investigation as soon as it happened. They were like, "Oh, we need to investigate this."
No, there was quite staunch campaigning by the family to get to
was there
the investigation stage. His still has been rapid
Ah,
compared to previous cases.
but that's why.
But the
Because
police
of the pressure on him, yeah.
The police association, the cop union, were trying to like throw a hissy fit about this all over the place, just like protesting
Not
that
really
there was
union.
even an inquiry into this, because they're a bunch of fucking fascists who
Yeah.
just want to be able to execute people and face no
Yeah.
consequences. When it was announced that Blake was going to be arrested, about 300 Met police officers who carry guns came to hand in their like license to carry guns, because like, oh, if they shoot someone and they're going to get arrested for it, what's the point in them even getting to play with the toy, right? Like, it's so embarrassing.
It's
and
like
it's so frustrating.
such a wild, like their perspective is like, it's like, well, if I can't kill people with impunity, I don't want to kill people at all. It's like,
I don't want to kill people at all. I think it's actually, actually maybe it's that. Yeah, hand in that license to kill, actually, please. Please do. Like, I was the thing I just wanted to say about the thing about the media trying to he was no angel, like that tactic to do he was no angel, that tactic on Chris Kaba. Like, the lives of poor people are fucked up and messy and full of hurt and hard situations and harm received and harm given to others. And it is so easy, actually, for like the machine that controls like spectacle we see to create a pure space where like no one has ever done anything bad. And if you've heard about them, they must be if you've heard about them and they're a good person, then they've never done anything bad ever. But if they've done anything bad ever, then you should just disregard them. They're just like not a worthwhile person at all. And it's like, as soon as you contrast what you're supposed to think of like people you've heard of in the news to like people you know in real life, it's just impossibly large, the difference. Like, everyone you know in real life actually has a messy, complicated life where bad shit happens. It drives me up the wall. It just drives me up the wall.
No, for real. And I think as well, it's that kind of thing where it's like you are desperately trying to paint this picture to the public. But actually, if your politics and your morals are right, like you say, it's not necessary to be a perfect victim. In fact, it's impossible to be a perfect victim, actually. And that's what it is. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. But yeah, so, essentially, this police investigation was launched and there was a charge of murder. And Blake unsurprisingly escaped any kind of punishment earlier this week for killing Kaba when the trial concluded at the Old Bailey, once again proving that the state cannot hold itself accountable. It's extremely important to remember that no one should be able to be killed with impunity. I think I've worded that really badly. No one should be able to be killed by the state with impunity. In any society, whatever kind of justice system we want to see in the world, a truly liberated one just cannot exist when cops do. It's that amount of power that you give someone, give them a fucking gun. Shit like this is going to happen in a society, even who knows, like what kind of utopian society we're imagining, where like somehow everything's really good, but cops also don't exist. I can't really imagine it, to be fair. So, fuck that ridiculous logical exercise. And let's move on. Tim, tell us about...
It's the world without lawyers from The Simpsons, but it's just... It's a world without cops. That's it.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Literally. Tim, tell us about the workers protesting the policy reforms.
So, I've been talking a little bit over the last year or so about our new coalition government down here and how, like, since they got in, they've been just pushing, like, reform after reform that is, like, hugely anti-worker, hugely anti-Maori, like anti-poor, anti-renter, anti-everyone that's not already, like, a millionaire landlord, basically. Just a couple of days ago, thousands of public and private sector workers across the country protested against the government's perceived anti-worker policies, particularly cuts to public service jobs. So, our capital, Wellington, has, like, that's the center of where, of the public service in New Zealand, right? And one of the first things that the new coalition government did when they got in was just like fire thousands of public service workers, which is like so wild and totally unprecedented as well. Their excuse was that, well, we hired heaps. Well, the previous government hired heaps, so there was this idea of like of government bloat, and we needed to cut down and everything like that. But really, it was like totally in line with the growth of the government in general, the growth of a lot of these kind of these systems and things that have been put in place. And so they acted as if this was just like, like they just have like these rooms full of like, like bureaucrats or whatever. And it's just like a bunch of people doing fake jobs or whatever like that. And they're like, we'll get rid of all of them. But then it turned out that this is like, these are the people that, like do everything from your tax returns through to like, because we have a public health system. So this is like frontline health workers, all these kind of things. And just thousands of them let go all at once. The majority all from Wellington. So and so Wellington took this massive hit where it was like thousands of inner city workers disappeared overnight, because they've all lost their jobs and stuff. So there's been a huge response focused around Wellington. It is our capital, but just in general, like there's been a huge shift down there where everyone from like the workers that were let go themselves to local business owners and all these people that are just like, oh damn, well, like I ran a cafe down the road from their offices, and now my cafe is dead because there were like hundreds more people in that building last week or whatever than there are now. So in general, like a lot of my friends that live down there and work down there have said like it's actually wild how like everyone down here just like, even the people that were kind of like on the fence, now everyone just fucking hates the coalition government, because if all the other stuff wasn't enough, like if the general right wing stuff wasn't enough, now relatively like like people that think they are like apolitical or unpoliticized or whatever, seeing that this is like an attack on workers and all this kind of stuff. So so these kind of protests have actually really kind of struck a chord with a lot of people outside of, what we would consider like the left or whatever. But yeah, so a bunch of unions got together, the Council of Trade Unions, and organized this Fight Back Together movement. And they've been kind of like, like building up this kind of like momentum recently. And so they're doing the thing where like like the Council of Trade Unions has a bunch of representatives from all different unions, and they're all working together to kind of like present a cohesive kind of like a list of demands and things like that covers everyone, or like broadly as much as they can while still being kind of cohesive. So there's things about like a lot of these recent policy changes are things like the removal of fair pay agreements, which is relatively recent in New Zealand as well. And they've brought back 90-day trials for jobs. So you could be like fired within 90 days, like roughly 3 months. Just for whatever reason, that you could be doing amazing, all that kind of stuff. And then your boss could just be like, okay, cool. Well, like we don't actually want you or need you or whatever. And these have been super exploitative in the past in New Zealand. Like lots of people, instead of hiring like a casual worker or whatever, they would just hire they'd hire someone and then get rid of them within the 90 days. So yeah, a lot of these other things, there's a whole bunch of policies that they were like, this is, like we need to change these things back, or we need to re-implement these things and stuff. So that was a hugely successful protest. Thousands of people down in Wellington, as well as others in different cities. Like there was a big one up here as well. It's been good to see, because while a lot of the protests against the current coalition government have been, and I think rightly have been, focused on the attacks against Maori in particular, I think there is, it's one struggle, right? Like there's a broader, I think, coalition to be made amongst like a lot of the even more conservative trade unions, I would say.
Yeah. It's like the basic thing of like the right wing in power is that they consolidate so much power that everyone's like, oh, we have one enemy. Like it's clear who the enemy is. And like the evil of liberals in power is that they like make enough of a bargain with people that they feel like they're happy with the ruling class, and it's like, no, they're still the ruling class, they're the enemy.
So it's good to see all that, and also good to see that at all of these protests is also like, like even when it's like the trade unions, there is a heavy presence of, there's like Maori protesters and activist groups, there's Palestinian groups, there's there's everyone's there. And it's like, as opposed to when you see these kind of like reactionary kind of protests, and there'll be like like a handful of people that are just like total nerds, not affiliated with any real groups or anything like that, and they're just like this disparate kind of force or whatever. Whereas like, I love seeing these things where it's like it's a huge group of people that like have found the common struggle together, and are working in real terms to kind of to fight the fight. So cool. Well, that's it for the news section this week. Just a little reminder, if you do like what we do here and you want to support us, you can jump over to our Patreon. That's Red Planet at Patreon, and there's different tiers there.
Patreon.com. It's patreon.com/red_planet.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like I will never bookmark it. Every time I need to bring it up, I just search Red Planet Patreon. Whatever. I always get there in the end. Different tiers, so you can support us as much as or as little as you like. Awesome, cool. Well, so now we should move on a little bit to our main topic segment.
In the imperial core, it is ever present that our countries are not just complicit but active participants in the genocide and ethnic cleansing happening to Palestinians. Whilst it can be disheartening to learn how evil the people in charge of us are, there is hope to be found in the struggle on the ground with amazing movements. And joining us tonight is Masa from Youth Front for Palestine to talk to us about how they are resisting the genocide. Hi, Masa. Welcome.
Hi. Okay.
Hiya.
Hi.
So,
You're right.
welcome to Red Planet. How are you doing? Yep.
Good, good. It's like nice to. Do you know what? I love the fact that it's 9 p.m. and not 9 a.m. Like having to join this type of discussion.
Well,
Because
it is for
honestly, I
Tim.
feel like I'm more switched on at night than I am during the day. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Nighttime is
Me
the right
too.
time.
Yeah.
For real, for real.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
just in the sort of preamble intro that I farcically went through just then, I was talking about how YFFP is resisting the genocide in Palestine here in the Imperial Core, in the belly of the beast. Why don't you tell us, first of all, a little bit about Youth Front for Palestine?
Yeah, so Youth Front for Palestine was set up in 2022. We just commemorated our second anniversary earlier this year. And it was in the aftermath of the Unity Intifada in 2021, which was the uprisings in Palestine, which were resisting against like yet another instance of violent displacement, specifically in Sheikh Jarrah in Palestine, which is a place in Palestine that was being the inhabitants of which the indigenous population were being violently expelled. So Youth Front was set up to really provide a space for younger generations to really have a voice, have an avenue to be able to actually mobilize for Palestine, because there was a lack of that really at the time, and the Unity Intifada and the mobilization that happened around that time um gave an indication that there was so much capacity and so much opportunity for people to actually, or for the youth to step up like they have done across kind of revolutionary history, whether you look at Algeria, South Africa, you see this reiteration of youth mobilization. It was lacking, at least in or around kind of Manchester and the north. So Youth Front was set up to do that. And the other reason why it was felt necessary was because a lot of the youth spaces that are given are quite passive, that are set up are quite passive. They're not um actually taking kind of concrete, tangible action against the Zionist entity. It's more so kind of like a cultural aspect, and I'm all for culture. I think it's a very important part of resistance to the preservation of culture, but we also have to hit these types of settler colonial entities where it hurts, which is their pockets. So yeah, that's why YFFP was set up to help that
Brilliant.
be done.
And it's literally like, YFFP was presented to me when I was well, I've been on the committee of GMTU for a while, but YFFP was presented to us at the committee of GMTU to affiliate to. I think it was last year. And what was presented to us was the campaigns against normalization, which I thought was really, really actually super important and not something that I'd really like considered before, because Israel is so like, they have all of this money and they send out fucking like brigades of people to schools all over the fucking world to be like, oh, Israel just is there and don't worry about any other countries that people talk about in that region. And yeah, so like I wonder if you could tell us a bit about those campaigns about anti-normalization to begin with.
Yeah, so normalization, just for kind of anyone who wanted like a basic definition, is anything which like legitimizes Israel, anything which legitimizes the regime as though this is something which is has a right to exist and has a right to do as it does to Palestinians, which is commit ethnic cleansing, genocide, violent displacement. And to be against normalization is a core principle of pro-Palestine activism. What we consider to be part of the Thawabit being the Palestinian red lines, the constants. The word like thawabit or imthabbat, something imthabbat in Arabic is something that is fixed and immovable. So to be against normalization in all its forms and all its manifestations is part of what's, what the core is to be supportive of the Palestinian call for liberation. So the anti-normalization kind of movement or stance is exactly that, is to denounce anything which platforms, which justifies, which legitimizes Israel and gives this kind of false narrative or supports this false narrative of this being two sides, and conflating an oppressor dynamic with, oh, these are two entities that are warring with each other, and it's just not at all. So the way that we actively move against normalization is to basically take stands and to effectively target any entity, any organization which purports to normalize Israel. So this means, like, for example, that a common one is Solutions Not Sides, which is an organization which effectively seeps its way into academic institutions commonly, and to students and children especially, presents Israel and Palestine as something which can be discussed, and for literally a solution to come to can be attained. So some campaign that was undertaken was to get Solutions Not Sides out of academic institutions, and one of the academic institutions which was successfully or we were successful in convincing to, or forcing even to remove Solutions Not Sides, was Loreto College. They effectively stated that the head teacher effectively stated that as long as I am head teacher at the school, at the college, we are not going to host Solutions Not Sides.
And
And yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's top that.
yeah.
No, and I think that's so important. Like that kind of a statement as well is pretty powerful. Do you think that there was a lot of sort of education given to that like particular head teacher that made them sort of so ardently be like, no, yeah, never, we're never getting these guys back?
To be honest, it was I from what I understand, it was a kind of a mix between education and literally being forced to decide that this type of disruption is just not worth it. And ultimately in Britain, that is a common thing. Like, it's a common thing that we are not successfully appeasing to the morality of people, or of specifically of institutions. I don't know what the personal views were of that head teacher, but ultimately, to successfully mobilize here, it's often the case that they just decide it's just not worth it's just not worth the hassle, it's not worth the disruption. So I wouldn't know which one of those it really was, but given how we've approached things, I would hope that it was at least a mixture of the two. And I hope that that particular head teacher did it because of their own kind of like moral conscience, but usually it's
You'd
because
like to think,
disruption.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that is it, isn't it? Like that is just like historically what we see with activism, like any kind of activism. If you're like, disrupting enough, that's actually when you get the goods.
Yeah.
And talk to us a bit about that in relation to like pressure targets at the moment, because there's some really cool stuff that YFFP are doing at the moment.
Yeah, so in terms of our main pressure targets at the moment, we've got BNY Mellon, Bank of New York Mellon, that is an American institution or corporation which funnels over 10 million pounds into Elbit Systems, which is Israel's largest weapons manufacturer. So we commonly kind of organize actions against them. The most recent one was a demonstration outside of the BNY Mellon Piccadilly office. They've got two offices in Manchester currently, one in Spinningfields and one in Piccadilly. And that was an emergency demonstration following uh, um, the bombing of Al-Aqsa Hospital, which happened a couple of weeks ago. uh, and yeah, effectively, it was a stance to say that we know exactly where your money is going, where your profit is going, and we're not going to relent until those ties are cut. So that was one. Until recently, AXA, which is a multinational insurance company, a French multinational insurance company, was also one of them. They had been kind of funneling millions into three major Israeli banks that were actually outlined by the UN as being active participants in war crimes, in Israeli war crimes. Again, through kind of a diversity of tactics, email blockades, phone blockades, things like that, office crashes, etc. They eventually cut those ties to those banks, though they didn't they admitted it, but it was almost like they didn't want to admit it. They held like a
Cowards, innit?
conference. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
almost like they they worded it very carefully. They said, we can confirm that AXA doesn't have any, and that means any, not even £1 of investments in these banks. But they never said that they didn't ever have, effectively. So it was just it was a confirmation that, they've clearly succumbed to it. And yeah, the representative at the time of AXA, who was leading that conference, even stated the phone blockades were a massive disruption to them. So again, yeah. Yeah, BNY Mellon. We also often target BAE Systems, which, as we all know, weapons manufacturer. They create the components of the F-35 fighter jets that are used to. They're currently being used to bomb Gaza and Lebanon. Um, uh, so again, BAE is another target of ours. We often have followed them through like different event crashes and things like that. And ultimately, yeah, we are quite targeted and focused in who we follow, because we don't believe in sporadic targeting. We don't think that's effective. So yeah, those are just some of the targets that we focus on currently. Yeah.
Yeah, buzzing. And there's like a bunch of other stuff that you're doing. Like I've seen some stuff on Instagram about linking up with students at University of Manchester.
Yeah, for sure. So, basically, YFFP often works alongside different organizations, like we call it like a Manchester coalition. And this involves yeah, working alongside student organizations within University of Manchester. University of Manchester is currently still complicit in furthering and escalating the genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza and across occupied Palestine, because they have ties. There's so many reasons why, but currently the target, or the tangible target that we think is to be focused on, best to be focused on, is their ties to Tel Aviv University and the Hebrew University. Uh, and yeah, these are effectively academic institutions that actively participate in creating the like technology that, or the kind of military principles that the regime uses to implement. So one of them is called the Dahiya Doctrine, which is basically where the military apply you know they will target civilian areas basically in order to create to ensure maximum impact, which means, as we've seen in Gaza, as many deaths as possible, as many massacres as possible, in order to achieve their military aims. So these types of academic institutions are complicit in that. And so we work with organizations within the University of Manchester in order to put pressure on the university in that regard. And one of the tactics that was used was the encampment, the student encampment, formerly known as Brunswick Park, but we renamed it Dr. Adnan al-Burj Park, in the name of Dr. al-Burj, who was a martyr. He was the head of the orthopedic department in Al-Shifa Hospital, and he was detained by the regime and ultimately tortured and was martyred whilst in detention after being held for months. So we named it after him in honor of that sacrifice that he made. And yeah, the encampment was another tactic alongside the coalition in Manchester to put pressure on the university. So that's just a glimpse of how we work alongside. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had someone on from the Palestine camp as well, like one of the students as well, and that was and I spent a bunch of time at the camp as well myself, and you know, there's so much that something like that actually does alongside the direct targeting and, you know, the organizing that goes on within there as well, like just like that sort of like beacon of hope that you get when you see something like that and it's beautiful and everybody's actually, you know, nothing's perfect, you know what I mean? I'm not going to comment on anything in particular, but like, you know, it's the everybody coming together, like the good was overwhelming, you know what I mean?
Definitely,
the good that came out of it, and it's heartening. Yeah, so like that, everything that YFFP is doing is just like super based, and like obviously really, really like huge kudos to all of you at YFFP. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about sort of your history in activism and like maybe how you got started with YFFP, or if you've done anything before that.
Yes, so basically as a Palestinian, you kind of feel almost an obligation, like a duty to venture out and see where you can assist, where you can help, where you can amplify kind of the call of people back home. It's been difficult over the years to find a place where I've felt like my ideology aligns with the ideology of the organization or of the group. And what I mean by that is, being in Britain, there is a lot of both sides and two-state solutions and things like that, even coming from sometimes within spaces, you know, from supporters of the cause. And it was never something that I really wanted to immerse myself in. So it was difficult to, over the years, actually enter into that activism space. I was in the Palestine Society in University of Central Lancashire, which is where I graduated from, and we ultimately passed a BDS policy for a few years. I believe it was 3 or 5 years that was intact for. We did face a lot of backlash during the time that I was in the university. I have seen like a big shift in acceptance of mobilizing for Palestine. Like back then, we used to have like every year something called Israeli Apartheid Week, which was a whole week of just, you know, educational workshops and events, and you know, really just trying to immerse people in the university's complicity. And the university, because around the time the government essentially expanded the definition of anti-Semitism, and that included criticism of Israel. So the university not wanting to get into, are we allowed to swear? Am I allowed to
Oh
swear?
yeah, you can
Oh, right,
swear as
okay,
much
cool.
as you like.
I was gonna say not getting into shit, and then I was like, oh, am I supposed to be? It's fine. Yeah. So the university didn't want to get themselves into any of that kind of you know, discourse, I guess you'd call it. And yeah, they cancelled it. They cancelled the whole week, and we had to hold it outside. And who turned up to the event? Solutions, not sides. So it was
Right.
that was my first experience of solutions, not sides, like face to face. And I remember they were asking these questions, like they were trying to compare the deaths of Palestinians with, any war that happens across the world. And it was a very strange, I learned very quickly that my biggest mistake in an activism space is to give the time of day to these types of people, because you never learn anything and you never gain anything. And
Yeah.
that was probably my last time ever engaging in discourse with someone who was trying to normalize.
Yeah.
After that, I was
Organizing
like,
is
I'm
all
done.
building, right? It's all building, and if someone's doing anything but helping you build your thing, you don't need to engage with them.
No, no, all they're doing is just throwing spanners in the works intentionally in order to kind of shift your focus. That's it. So I learned
Literally.
after that. I think the oh, actually no, I lied. I lied. The last time that I ever engaged in, because I want to include Zionists in it as well. The last time that I ever remember engaging in a discourse with someone who was trying to justify what's going on in Palestine was a Zionist himself. I remember um we were sat in the room with some of the kind of the higher ups from the university, discussing the BDS policy that we want to pass. And this guy pulls out his Israeli passport and he's like, I'm a Zionist. I mean, no, he didn't say that. Sorry, that's what I heard. He went, I'm an Israeli and this is my passport and I can't remember for the funniest thing, I don't remember for the life of me what he said. I blacked out, and then, like, not physically, but as
And
in I
when you
don't
woke up,
remember
he
what
was
happened.
gone, and that's all we know.
And I remember coming to, and I was literally finished whatever I was saying, and him and a couple of others were just leaving the room. And my friends in the society were just like, "Oh my God, that was great." And I genuinely don't remember anything that I
That's
said.
wild.
But that's my last time. I learned very quickly this is just silly. Fast forward, sorry, this is a long-winded explanation, but
No,
fast
take as
forward.
much time as you like. As much time as you like. Honestly.
Yeah, they were such a great group, the UClan Palsoc. Like there's so many amazing people. Um, Especially Anam. She's called Anam. She was the president of the UClan Palsoc. Amazing people. There's some people that you meet in activism spaces that are just so incredibly intelligent and educated, and they are the people that you want to surround yourself with, because they'll always make you strive to know more and want to know more. And the more we know, the more we equip ourselves and we're able to mobilize more effectively. So yeah, she was amazing in that meeting as well. And that she was a key reason as to why we got that passed. Fast forward, a couple of years, and I go to protests and events and things like that, but I hadn't had a consistent place to kind of put my efforts towards. And then last year, after October 7th, um, it was, I would call it, for want of a better phrase, almost like, for me, a desperate, like, attempt to just clutch any opportunity to do something effective. And I was anywhere that I heard there was a Palestine event. I was going Liverpool, Wakefield, wherever, just to do something. And then one time I go to like this Wally Range, the organizations in Wally Range, like Greater Manchester Friends of Palestine. Um, they arrange a rally every Wednesday between, I think it's 5 and 6 p.m. in Wally Range.
Big intersection in it, the road
Yeah,
intersection.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. And I went to it and I met some people from YFFP there. And since then, just never looked back, because it just clicked like that. ideology of doing something effective and utilizing your time to mobilize tangibly was just so clearly there. And yeah, so that's been the past over a year now. That's been my year of just, yeah, in the thick of
Yeah.
it with YFFP. Yeah.
I found it really like relatable when you said that like you had that moment of desperation and like the past, Palestinian resistance movement in the UK has been so like spotty,
Mm.
and like sparse, and there was that always that like big fear that like that Israel's planning this like big fucking thing, and when's it gonna happen, and then all of a sudden, of fucking October, like it wasn't technically October the 7th, it was the day after, in it. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? When all the
Yeah. Yeah.
fucking the genocide started, like this particular part of it anyway, and yeah, like it's one of those things. Like I was in tears. You know what I mean? Like a lot. And you get desperate and you think like, what the fuck can we do? And I think a lot of people were thinking that, and the response has been insane. And what would you say, like, not just as an activist, like a pro-Palestinian activist, but as a Palestinian, like, to see that like the entire world has essentially woken up to this now? Like, what are your thoughts on that, on how that's happened?
It's a bittersweet feeling because, like, I can't, it's a balance really between such loss and such gain because you see what's going, like, it was being live streamed, like the suffering and the massacres, and um yeah, it's a difficult thing to deal with because I don't think I've ever seen this type of horror before. Uh, and I always just say to myself, I'm from what they call the West Bank. Um, and thinking of what ifs, like my family weren't expelled in 48 during the Nakba. They weren't expelled during 67 in the Naksa. Um, you know, and a big part of me just always grappled with that, like we could have been. Like, had we been 50 miles this way or 50 miles that way, or, we would have been potentially, um, you know, refugees ourselves, or we would have been in Gaza, or we would have been in Tul Karim refugee camp. And it's a massive thing to kind of like grapple with, not because of those what ifs, like, oh, well, oh, that could have been me. No, it's that I, whenever there's a hit on Palestinians in Gaza, it's like that's a hit on us. That's the thing that people kind of forget sometimes. Like when we see those bullets penetrate flesh, when we see airstrikes just decimating tents, like when we see that, that is as as though it cuts deep, and because that could be that's when I see a mother, clutching her child, her dead child, like I see my mom, and I think that's a sentiment we all share. Like we do personalize it, like, but I think as a Palestinian, there's another level of it. It's like we're finally being seen, but at what cost? So it's a bit of sweet feeling, and I always honor the martyrs first and foremost. And I think the best thing that has come out of this year, if I could phrase it that way, is the fact that as long as we continue this momentum, they have not been lost in vain.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by bittersweet. It's a heavy thing, but at the same time, I've never seen this level of focus on Palestine before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Never.
it when you're suffering, it means a lot to have other people be able to see the world as like to share your story and like to see that you're suffering and the way that you're suffering, but it doesn't necessarily alleviate the suffering, right?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
No.
It's that balance between, yeah, just trying to accept what you've lost and move towards utilizing things that lot like the attention that's been brought to the cause. utilizing that effectively so that the loss is not an actual loss, if that makes sense. It's a
Yeah.
weird thing to grapple with, I'd say, yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that with us. Honestly, that was really, yeah, really, really big of you to share that. I think that like it's been really good to see that like every single week there's been continuous protests, because that is something that is sort of like a fear. It's like, well, people just gonna fucking forget about it again, you know? And I think you're so right. Like keeping that momentum up is the absolute aim of the game at the moment. Like just never stop talking about it. Keep fucking telling people about it. Keep taking as much action as you can. Yeah, for real. There's a lot of things that obviously like people don't talk about as well in terms of like resistance that is happening in not just in Gaza, but also like in Lebanon, in the West Bank. You know, and there's so much going on at the moment, particularly with like the Zionist entity, you know, essentially like going psycho mode, really, in it. You know, it's this overly confident, you know, because it's got like I don't know if I don't think you were here for this part of the discussion, but we were likening Israel to like a teacher's kid. Like it's the kid in the class whose mum is the teacher, and like, you know, so they get all this privilege, and they act like a piece of shit and fucking like,
Yeah, in the way that the international community is operating around them, like they're just exempt from all the
I
rules.
understand, yeah.
yes, and like, and that is really kind of what's happening now. Like they're acting with such impunity. They're smashing fucking UN watchtowers in Lebanon. They're fucking destroying Lebanon again. You know, intensifying the massacres in Gaza and all this stuff, and now trying to fight Iran. And I just wanted to sort of like ask you what your thoughts are on sort of like this particular juncture that we're at. Also in mind, you know, bearing in mind like the fact that actually like they keep trying to do ground invasions in Lebanon and they keep getting fucking battered, you know, like because of the resistance and stuff. So I wanted to know what your thoughts are on that.
So what my thoughts are on the way Israel's acting in response to like the resistance.
And the state of how like the you know the Zionist entity is essentially like, there are so many things happening to it that are like, people are sort of saying like this could be the end of Israel, this could be the end of like the project and stuff like that, like people fleeing, like leaving them their bank accounts and stuff like that. So the kind of like, you know, where it's at right now, essentially. Yeah.
I think to assess like where it's at right now, we have to look to the past really, and look at the pattern in which Israel has conducted itself, not just since, you know, the inception of something called the creation of something called Israel, or Israel I should say, but before, like when we're talking about Herzl, like historical elements of it, like Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, and you know what they intended it to be. They intended it to be a settler colonial um project, right? Like Herzl was the one that said, you know, uh and just to venture into there's a point to it, like it's like the military basis to how Israel functions, and the violence with which it functions. You have to look to the past. Like Herzl would say things like, you know, without soldiers, there's no land. Without land, there's no state. Without a state, there's no Zionism. Like David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, would say, you know, let's not ignore the truth. You know, we're the aggressors. They defend themselves. The country's theirs, and they inhabit it, and we're wanting to come here and settle down. We're coming to take it. Um, you know, everything that Zionists have pursued from the inception of the Zionist ideology has been inherently violent, right? And they have been given the space to operate and to um kind of allow the pursuit of this project to be done by any means necessary. And that is why throughout the last century, they have escalated and escalated. You know, there were massacres even before 48 that were done by Zionist gangs. against Palestinians, that were committed against Palestinians. And it's because this settler colonial ideology, this settler ideology gives this false sense of entitlement. And with Israel specifically, it's manifested itself in such an abhorrent, horrific way because um there's no accountability. So Western imperialism and the way that that plays a part is like I understand like the likening of the international community, like the classroom and the teacher and the teacher's kid and everything like that. It's I think with regard to Israel's relationship with the West, it's gone even beyond that now. You know that kid's grown up and has basically uh stuck a middle finger up at the teacher and gone, we're going to do whatever the hell we want to do now, right? And even with the uproar of the classroom, and even if the teacher themselves is a bit like, actually, you've gone a bit far, you've got Macron, you've got France saying that you're going too far from months ago, right?
Yeah.
And it's yeah, and you've got Germany
even someone like
supporting it, yeah.
Wes Streeting, like who's just such a scumbag through and through, who's taken like £30,000 from the Israel lobby in the UK, has even said publicly like that he says it in the most mild way possible, obviously, but
Yeah,
he
of
says
course,
they've
yeah.
gone too far, and it's just like that you bought that guy. That's a guy you own, like, and he says that like
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like they've got to the point where they're so used to acting with impunity and lack of accountability that there is nothing in their eyes which they cannot do, no matter how grotesque, no matter how evil. This is all justified. And they genuinely believe that. That's the thing. Like settlers in occupied Palestine, they genuinely believe that this is a justified means to a justified end. So when you look at the dynamic with resistance factions, and how they are, demonized and how they are considered to be terrorists, and even the word, if we wanted to talk about the origin of the word terrorism, we could go on for hours, like, it being used by the West to effectively denounce anything violent, because they don't agree with that violence, because they don't agree with that violence. And what we're dealing with is resistance, violent resistance against a violent oppressor. And historically speaking, that is how things have gone down, in order for an oppressed people to liberate themselves, right? So Israel's like reaction to the resistance, be it in Lebanon or Palestine, has been, you know, how to say it in English, like in Arabic, it's like انفعلوا, like مقهورين, like that they've just lost it. Like how can they do this? Like how can they, after everything that Israel are thinking, after everything we've done to them, and they are still going, how is this possible? And therefore it gets more aggressive, the escalation gets more aggressive. But if you look at what's happening on the ground and you compare that to what's happening above the ground, you'll see a big disparity between the success, I would say, of the oppressor above the ground and on the ground, because you cannot compete with a people that want to free themselves, no
Yeah.
matter what military artillery you have.
Yeah, like the attempts to, because what they're doing right now, they've got that corridor that they're trying to build. It's like a canal that they're trying to build through the center of Gaza so that they can like control the trade routes, because the Suez Canal keeps, or is it the Suez Canal? I don't know. The Red Sea, the Houthis keep attacking in the Red Sea, and like so they want to have that like extra trade route there, and it also splits up Gaza as well. That's like another thing, and
the Ben
you have.
Gurion Canal Project.
Is that what that's
Yeah.
called? I don't know. Yeah, but basically, yeah, they're trying to like build it straight through to the sea, and like so they're doing that. But the thing is that it's taken them so long to do these projects because of the resistance. Like they're constantly, like we were just talking about Electronic Intifada and Asa Winstanley getting arrested a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, whenever it was. And it's like, if you watch the Electronic Intifada, you see the way that the resistance is like constantly, literally fucking doming the IOF, like in unimaginably creative ways, like with very little equipment. Like the resistance is so committed, like so unbelievably committed. And I keep seeing these videos of fucking IOF soldiers, and they're like walking through urban warfare stuff. Alexis de Loomis, I don't know if you know Alexis de Loomis, Masa, but like he was a guy that was in the Rojavan revolution in northeast Syria, and he did a film, and we had him on the other week, and he was talking to us about like combat in urban environments, and you just like fall over a lot because there's rubble everywhere. And Israel can't even get that right because they're not training their guys to do combat. They're training them.
It's like an occupying bully force, not like an actual combat force.
There's all these videos of them like falling over. It's funny as fuck. Like,
or just like, we see these things every day where they're like, the resistance has taken out, like 7 soldiers, and then you see a photo and it's because it's like 7 soldiers standing back to back, like all this like,
well, like
what's going on? It's like, that was like one grenade. Like
it's also the other side of that like fascist logic that they all love Sparta, right? And then they think like, oh, if everyone is a soldier in our society, then we have the biggest possible army. And so like the forced conscription or the what is it, like national service of the IDF, like the flip side of it is like you have a lot of people who don't want to be soldiers and like aren't good at being soldiers. Also, like, isn't it in the IDF people get to like really high up ranks, like colonel or whatever, and they're like 23?
Yeah,
because there's
it's
just
like
so many like
served and
kids.
stuff.
Yeah,
it is ridiculous, and it's like I think there's like like with the conscription thing, how it's like they do the service and they become reservists and all this kind of stuff. Like I know people, like I actually know people who have defied conscription. Like I used to work for a woman who she grew up in Israel, from a Russian family, and she always kind of had a weird feeling about it, but it wasn't until she was like in her teens where she was like, actually this is like a really fucked up place, and she ended up leaving the country. But she got out of conscription. She said like it wasn't even that bad, like it's like a little bit of kind of social ostracization and all this kind of stuff like that, but she was like, I would rather do that than go be part of this thing, and but people make a big deal about it being like, oh, like it's this thing that everyone has to do. You have to go and do this thing. And it's like, then I hear from, I read other things, or I have a friend that actually did go. He's from over here. He's a Maori dude who's Maori Jewish, and he went over and he was in the IDF, and because he had no idea, it was just this thing that his mum told him that like, one day you'll get called up and you'll do this thing. And he went over there and it was like, wow, my experience as an Indigenous New Zealand guy has, it's taken me here and given me a completely different lens to view this situation from like everyone else that I am here training with. And even then they like he was, like there was like racism and stuff that he had to deal with there, being like not a, him being like a Jew from, like a brown Jew from Polynesia, like sort of thing. And so that made, he was like, fuck this is horrible, like this is not what I was told it was going to be, and he kind of got wise to it. But I think that you have to consider that like when people are conscripted and when they are doing these things, they are becoming part of the machine. Like they are the things that are enforcing Zionism on the ground, so like I had a tweet blow up, like I don't know, it's like a couple of weeks back. People got really a lot of really ridiculous people got really, really mad at me because I said something about like a bunch of military reservists getting killed or whatever, and all these people were like, oh well, they're civilians. And it's like, but these are people that they have taken part in this. Like when we talk about like enforcing the apartheid system, when we talk about, you know, like this whole thing, it's not enforced by like an abstract concept. It's enforced by humans, like people, soldiers, and these are those people, like everyone, you know, to an extent in the society that has been through the system. At some point, they were the person that was enforcing, you know, enforcing the whether it's guarding a checkpoint or, you know, pointing a gun at someone or whatever like that. Like they were all part of this, and you can't really like you can't separate you can't separate the concept from the actual people, you know, like you have to be uh like it's impossible to kind of just see someone that has served in these systems and has become, you know, like if they were conscripted or whatever, and they're a reservist now, like they were always part of that. They were a soldier there. They
Yeah.
were, you know, like they were
Like
doing these terrible things.
one of the fucking reservists was one of the guys. Well, not one of the reservists that you were on about, but they got one reservist guy, and he's like 91 years old, and he took part in the. I can't remember the Dare Yassin massacre.
Oh yeah, really. Right.
And they brought him out as this like speak about all this stuff, and he was just being such a fascist, like, you know,
Yeah.
like now is the time to murder everyone, etc., etc. Yeah, really, really bad stuff, you know. So it's like, yeah, well, you know, you could be a civilian and like a massive fascist, like that's possible. And I think also it's important that you make the point that like, oh, actually, Israelis can get out of conscription if they want, and it's not that bad. Because, you know, their society is so fucking fascist and brain poisoned that everyone wants to fucking do it. Like everyone
like
does take that choice.
The bad things that she faced was like social ostracization. You know, it was like, I think she said she had to do some time in like, basically it was like, you know, they say you're going to get locked up in jail, but it was just like, you know, she said it was fine. It was like she just had to go stay at this like facility thing for a little while, but they would like let her out between certain hours. It was kind of, you know, like this really weak sort of thing. And it was
Finland
just that, like
prison.
everyone called her names, and they were all like, oh, I can't remember the name for it, but they're like, oh, you're a or whatever like that. And she's like, okay, like, I mean, is this a punishment? Like, you're just calling me a name? Like, I'm not going out to like kill children. Okay, yeah, like
I did the right
you know, like
thing.
what's the name for that? Like that's the thing. We should have a slur for that, right? Like
yeah. It's good to talk about, like, you know, the resistance in terms of like how it inspires hope in you, it keeps you fighting and stuff like that. But I think like it would be good to go back to some more YFFP stuff, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
I think that it was really interesting to see YFFP's involvement in the Palestine resistance camp. And I was wondering, like, did you spend much time at the camp, or?
Oh, the camp.
You did.
The camp.
Yeah.
You know, the camp was an interesting experience. You know, I guess I would start off by saying that it was, you know, as you were saying, Mule, before, it was an amazing kind of show of community, of solidarity. I think there was at one point, because obviously it all sparked off in the US, there was one point where every single continent had these encampments going in some sort of academic institution. So it was amazing to be part of that. I think there still are some encampments going on across Britain. But the experience in Manchester was, we as YFFP always viewed it as like a tactic. I think we used to call it like a tactic within a strategy. Like it was a branch of a very large tree, basically, of activism, tactics. And our goal was, and in the coalition, I mean our, because it wasn't a YFFP camp, basically. We were as individuals kind of involved in the camp and helping to run it and things like that. And I spent a lot of time there. I probably spent almost every day uh at the camp outside of work. I'd come to the camp, spend kind of the entire night there, maybe till like 4 or 5 a.m. And then I'd head off, get a couple hours sleep, head off to work. Um, so it was a very like uh
It sounds intense.
yeah, intense. I was what's yeah, it was like a very it was an experience which absorbed everything, basically. And ultimately, people were disappointed, I think, when the decision was made to wrap it up. But I think they, I don't know whether they understand it now or whether they ever will. But ultimately, when something is not attaining the goal that you want, you have to take the strategic decision to, you know, take your resources elsewhere. So the camp was good because it brought people together. You know, there were a lot of connections that were made. People put UOM on the map as a widely known target now. You know, people I don't think before really understood what the extent of UOM's complicity is, not just the university links, but the BAE research connections and so on and so forth. So it wasn't something that I think was widely well known outside of the student sphere. But I'll always have an image in my mind of this massive banner that was unveiled uh outside the it was a building that we renamed Walid Doqa Hall.
Yeah.
Walid Doqa being a Palestinian political prisoner who spent 38 years um incarcerated and due to medical negligence was murdered by the regime. He was martyred. I think it was in April of this year. So we renamed it that, and yeah, the demands and the complicity of the university was just like unveiled on this huge banner across the side of Willie Docker Hall. And I think that was a poignant moment for me because never did I think that we would get to a point where like the mobilization within Manchester or across Britain, you know, was so strong that the community would come together like this and support this and be cheering on people who've occupied a building and things like that. There's a massive shift. So the camp was interesting experience. It did kind of take a lot of time, a lot of effort. And when we saw that the demands weren't kind of being met as we would have liked, because there was, you know, we'd entered into negotiations and things like for the first time in a long time. Um, you know, when I say we, obviously, I don't mean me personally, but like people within the encampment entered into discussions and things like that. So that was a plus. But any part of effective activism is deciding when to take your resources and put them elsewhere. And that's effectively what happened with the camp. So yeah, amazing show of solidarity, but it was a tactic within a tactic within a strategy. And
Yeah.
ultimately, we felt there were more useful tactics to go down the path.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important point that you make there, in that, like, you know, when you're in a struggle, you're engaged in the same kind of thing that, you know, generals and majors and corporals do. You're strategizing, you're waging a war, do you know what I mean? You're fighting against the state, and it's difficult, and you have to really think about, like, what tactics are we going to use? And, you know, Sun Tzu was one of the best tacticians of all time, and, you know, he would say regularly, yeah, retreat, it's fine if you don't lose loads of men. That's a really smart thing to do. You know, and it's so valid. And I think as well, just like reminding ourselves that the point is to fight and to aim to win, for sure, but also whatever things happen along the way, sometimes you can't predict it. Sometimes even the smartest people can't predict it in the way that things go. and so it's always just worth doing it for that reason. You know, there are some such a thing as a, you know, flogging a dead horse and that kind of a thing, but even that sometimes is gonna have an effect, have an impact on someone. You know, if you just go into a room with someone and talk briefly about the struggle of Palestinians, who knows what kind of change that's going to make. That's what someone did with me, you know, like 14 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, my stepdad's a fucking Zionist pig and I hate him. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was one of them things, like, you know, but yeah, so you never know what kind of effect and what kind of result you're going to have. And speaking about that in particular, oh, sorry, did you have something to say?
No, it was just interesting what you said about like you know, you sometimes you have to retreat and everything. It reminds me of something my friend said. He always talks about a Palestinian. He was a Palestinian revolutionary called Basil al-A'raj. And he would talk about because obviously he was on like the forefront of the resistance. He was ultimately martyred, and he was killed by the Zionist regime. But he would always say like, live like a porcupine. He had a phrase that said, live like a porcupine, fight like a flea. So like the premise of it being that, you know, porcupines are kind of notoriously underground like mammals and in like secluded spaces and things like that. And the point of it was that, and then fleas are obviously out and about and, you know, constantly, you know, on your physical being and in your presence, but you can't quite catch them. So the point of it being that, you know, you should live like a porcupine. You should know when there will be times where you will have to retreat. There will be times where you have to you know, seclude yourself and recuperate and think and strategize and whatever it may be. And then there'll be times where you do fight like a flea. And the point of it being that you will have to keep targeting, attacking your oppressor in different ways from all different angles until they kind of succumb effectively. So yeah, it just made me think of that really because it really is give and take in activism for sure.
Yeah, that's a perfect thing to link it to for sure. Like that's exactly it. Like you have to use every kind of tactic available to you, and that's actually really nicely sort of tied that up in a bow because I was going to ask you about sort of because you know you've gone into your history of doing activism, you've gone into what you do with YFFP, what YFFP do and stuff. You know, the aims of this show is to sort of get like book nerds, theory nerds, internet nerds who love talking about being a leftist out into the streets and actually doing stuff, or at the very least doing stuff from where they are, you know, that has a bit of an impact materially. And so it's always good to talk about like experiences of activists in their activism, as it were. Like you've spoken a lot about like what you've done and this, that, and the other, but talk to us about some of the things that you've come across in like, you know, what have been some of the hurdles to your activism? What have been some of the more difficult things to try and work with in any particular
Yeah,
example? Yeah.
I would say, okay, I would say it's hard to narrow it down in a sense. I'll talk about it kind of from a personal experience, like in my day-to-day life. My parents always instilled like this sort of pride in us as Palestinians. Like, yes, we do live here, but you know, this isn't really our home. Um, uh, and you know, people might disagree with that approach because you know, there have been people who've said, you know, why shouldn't we consider it our home? But I guess the premise that my parents were basing it on was that specifically as Palestinians, we have been, you know, effectively forced, whether it be through violent displacement, whether it be through um, economic repression, you know, living under an apartheid system, we've been forced to find alternative lives. And that is why they came. My parents relocated here after the first Intifada. And they were, you know, they just couldn't make a living for themselves in the area that they were living in Palestine, or wherever where my dad was from or where my mum was from. and they effectively left. So my parents would always say, we do live here, but this is not our home. And they would take us back to Palestine, almost every year. The difficulty with that was that, when you enter into spaces where, as a Palestinian, sometimes you are, how to say, this was before more so than now, but sometimes you weren't Palestinian enough, or sometimes you weren't British enough. So it kind of felt a bit like, you know, um, people didn't really understand why I have a northern accent, but my name is so foreign. Like it was a weird thing. And then I remember frequently being asked, oh, where are you from? And I'll be like, Palestine. And then I'd be met with, oh, where is that? Or, oh, you don't look Pakistani. And I'm like, okay, so I'm saying this all to say that one of the things that I found growing up was this sense of like fighting for the culture to be preserved, like that cultural identity to not be erased, um, and to really always just, and it's important. It seems like it's irrelevant to activism, but like we as YFFP, we're very focused on the Palestinian voice. So that was it's an important thing that I have had to grapple with over the past 27 years of my existence. That was one thing. The other thing was finding out the sheer complicity of Britain um was overwhelming actually as time went by, because you understood, like, as Palestinians you have this basic understanding that Balfour Declaration, without Britain and the British colonization of Palestine, this wouldn't have paved the way for Zionist colonization. You have this understanding, but you don't realize how entrenched, like, the Zionist entity is within our economy until you start picking it apart piece by piece. And I remember getting to this point of feeling like, how are we even gonna tackle this? And again, YFFP kind of gave me that answer, because it we operate on that premise of targeted, effective tactics, um, and making sure that we just, hone in on what's really going to hurt the regime rather than overwhelming ourselves with a million different targets. Uh, so that was another thing that was a struggle. And the last thing that I would say is that um being seen as victims, I think that's something that's been more commonly seen over the past couple of years, not just after the genocide started, but once Palestine has started to become, and that's because of social media, really, has started to become more, present on people's, sense of political consciousness. Um, they just like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for you. I'm so, like, I'm sad for you. I'm this, and really just like putting you in this group of poor, helpless, you know, victims.
It's like
That,
taking your agency away.
yeah, that doesn't, in my opinion, help us. It doesn't help us because we're not helpless. Yeah, there are awful things that are happening in Gaza right now, but I focus on the spirit of the steadfastness that they are showing, and there was a mother that I saw a clip of the other day, a Palestinian mother who was like, I have 10 martyred children, and I stand tall. And it reminded me, like, I cannot stand tall if I'm constantly victimizing myself, my people, either not Palestinians, any oppressed people. I shouldn't be victimizing them. I should be amplifying what they are calling for. That's the way that I see it. So, but that's a big thing in you'll have people coming up to you at protests once they find out that you're Palestinian. They'll be like, I'm so sorry, and they'll start crying. And I respect people's feelings, and I think that it's so important to let it out. We all feel that. But one of my friends always says to me is like, despair is actually, a tool of the oppressor. They want us to feel this despair. They want us to feel like there's no out to this, that there's no solution to this, that we'll always just be these, subjugated masses, and we will never know our homeland the way that it was before. And we say no, you know, we say
Yeah.
absolutely not. So those are the most difficult things to me, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really amazing. Yeah, I think that optimism is key. Revolutionary optimism is key. Like believing that it can be different. Otherwise, you don't do anything. You just don't do anything to change anything. I think what you're saying about British complicity was striking me because, like, even if you're all the way up to date with everything that has every way that we already know that Britain is complicit, even if you know all the history already and you know all the kind of big, long-standing connections, you follow Palestine action, you see what they're doing
Mm.
with Elbit systems or whatever. And then, like, even if you're all the way up to date, there's new stuff, like, not necessarily daily, but like week by week, there is new stuff coming to light because now people are more switched on to to look for it. And so like if they find out their employer is involved in something that's protecting some other company that's doing something, or they're finding out that you know what was it, Palestine Action shared documents the other day that were like the Crown Prosecution Service directly colluding with Elbit
Mm.
Systems to try to protect their interests. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have a question off the back of that, but it's just crazy, right? Like it's
It
just
is, it is,
yeah.
it's I think as what we kind of absorb this new information all the time, and it can become a bit demoralizing potentially because you're thinking like I said, but it's like this spider's web.
I
And
think
yeah.
it's yeah, I guess the cure to the demoralizing perspective there is just to all new information is another opportunity for us to be part of the solution. It's another like everything new that we learn is learning new stuff. We just read at the top of the news segment the
Mm.
call to action for northeastern Syria, and they were explicitly like pointing out which companies are involved in arming Turkey
Right.
because Turkey's bombing them, right? And yeah, I think getting that information out there. I wonder what you think of the possibility of like this having a change in like how people are organizing going forward, seeing like where they can directly sabotage like supply lines to that are supporting genocide. Because I feel like that's been a huge shift that we've seen is like people who are not just despairing or are not just being like not just kind of letting the grief of the world overwhelm
Mm.
them, like are deciding that direct action gets the goods, I guess, and that feels different on a big. It feels on a much bigger scale than before.
Definitely, yeah. Like what one thing that we do as YFFP is we very much focus on it's the only normalization we ever do, which is to normalize the concept of direct action and the practice of it, because the more people see that as a, like I said it, but I was at this talk like um at the working class library a couple of weeks ago, and it was a talk about like Ireland and Palestine, and like the solidarity historically, and like the tactics that have been used historically between these different movements and everything, and um uh, with particular focus um on getting it was called the troops out movement campaign, where they were trying to get a British military or armed forces out of Ireland and things. So I said, someone asked a question at the end. They said like, how do we escalate here? How can we escalate? And my answer to that was by making direct action against these active participants in genocide and ethnic cleansing and oppression across the world, the most normal thing in the world. Because we're looking at like Gaza has been under siege for 18 years, right? Palestine has been under occupation for 76. It's been colonized for over a century, through British and Zionist colonization. And I'm sorry, but you know, anyone who thinks that these, for example, Palestine actionists or anyone who takes direct action against these colonial entities, and that includes the British government, um, because they have made, their power grabs all over the world through colonial means. Anyone who denounces that as just, terrorism or vandalism or whatever type of phraseology they want to use is actually, I would say, a victim themselves of the poison of colonial mentality and oppressive mentality, because you have to free yourself of that, what they're teaching you. Like, you have to free yourselves of that. So normalizing direct action is, to me, the way forward. And that's as YFP what we do. There should not be shame or stigma associated with people that are going and shutting down an arms factory,
No,
or
this should be applauded. This is
they
these
should
are
be
heroic acts,
applauded.
genuinely. Yeah.
These are
Well, it's
political prisoners and actionists.
yeah, it's quite funny because one of the first ever guests we had on was Huda Amori from Palestine Action.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was way before October 7th. This was like, I can't even remember when this was, Sophie. I think it was like 2022.
It was in the
And
first
you,
year of doing the show, I
the
think.
first year we're doing the show, and like, the first thing that when I heard that there were people going to weapons factories and smashing the place up, I was like, yeah, like immediately it was like, this is the best fucking thing ever. And I just don't understand how anyone else can't react like that. Like, yeah.
And how they're like everywhere, right? Like there's like Albert factories over there. Like even down here in New Zealand, there's like Raycon out in South Auckland who have manufactured, it's like some kind of like crystal oscillator part that like goes into it's like a weapon component, and it gets sent to
Yeah.
America, and then they put in the bombs, they send it to Israel and stuff. And it's like, just like if you're looking to do an action, like you want to escalate and stuff like that, like you can find something, like there's something out there. Like it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with supply chains going all the way back to Congo for like a lot of the tech stuff or whatever. Like it's like that is, like that's the whole that's what it means, like when it's one struggle, everything is interlinked. Like this is like, what it means to globalize the intifada, to like see how all these things are connected, and how like working class people in the imperial core can actually, like the struggles are linked, and we can affect what is happening outside of it. It's like
That's a great
there's something
point.
out there. Yeah.
That's a perfect point to segue into a question I've wanted to sort of, well, not really a question, but just something I wanted to bring up as a point of discussion for Masa, like all night, really. Because I met you when you came to our fantastic Age of Reclamation conference that we did with GMTU. I spoke about it on Red Planet. And I think I actually mentioned you as well, because the way that you like represented the land struggle in Palestine to like housing issues in the UK, and just sort of like how that relates to stuff, and the way that the whole panel was discussing that kind of stuff was just like really, really, really solid. And I was just absolutely blown away by just how like good it was. And I think that's something that like I was keen to get your thoughts and like, on what you think about how you can relate the struggle in Palestine, how you can globalize the Intifada, like.
For sure, yeah. So I would say that that's just such a crucial point. Seeing our commonalities and focusing on them rather than what um differentiates us is the key to uh to use the phrase globalizing the intifada. Intifada um literally uh means to shake off, like this to rise up, to revolt, and I just don't think that first and foremost, we're able to do that if we are so focused on what makes us different, rather than what unifies us as people. So yeah, the reason why I mentioned, the land grabs in Palestine and likened it to the I would say repression in different forms here in Britain, is because people often compartmentalize, and they say, and they distance themselves, and they say, well, if my oppression doesn't look exactly like that which I am seeing before me on a different continent, then I don't have anything to kind of, see, or liken to my own life. And I think the point that I always make clear when it comes to making Intifada something that we can all be part of is by looking at your life, looking at the system under which you live, and saying, what is wrong with this system? And how are they benefiting from repression and oppression? And is this, although it doesn't manifest itself the same way as, let's say, it being subjected to a Palestinian, in Palestine, although it doesn't look the same, are the desires of the oppressive power the same? And I would say, whether you look at Britain, or whether you look at the USA, or whether you look at Israel, you look at the colonial trifecta, you will find that the pursuit of power in all instances is present, and very, very corruptly so. Like, this is why people are on our streets here in Britain, and people are going to food banks, and people are not able to fully utilize the healthcare system, even though it is sort of free apparently, but is not up to standard anymore because of the lack of funding. These are all interconnected struggles, you know, and the property, the property issues that we're having in this country, in terms of rising rent and rising property prices and things like that. These are all interconnected things, and people don't understand that if your government is more focused on funneling money into arms, into military factions, into settler colonial projects, than they are focused on their own people and making sure that the liberties of their people are protected, and that freedom for all really means freedom for all, then of course Palestine is relevant to you. Of course, just because you're not having a settlement, set up in freaking, I don't know, Charlton, right? And like, it's slowly expanding and encroaching upon where your home is. Just because it literally doesn't look like that doesn't mean that there is no repression, and that your government is not complicit in ensuring that you don't have freedom the same way that they're ensuring that Palestinians in Palestine don't have freedom. It looks different. There are different severities and different contexts, but the thing that motivates it is the same, because they think financially. And the thing that I said during that talk was something that I always say. I rinse this, which is that our oppressors speak with a financial tongue, and we must rip that tongue from them and leave them speechless. And that is the only way that we impact them effectively. It is by showing them that persecution is not profitable anymore, because the people will not accept it. And I truly believe that if people just really understood how connected the struggles are across the world, Palestine, Congo, Sudan, wherever, look to the indigenous population of America, the natives. Like, if you want an example of what this looks like and how that can manifest itself, you can look there even. It's everywhere. So we really need to focus on what motivates the systems under which we live and how that interconnects across the world. And I think there we will find unity, like proper unity, um, with what Intifada is supposed to inspire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was so good. That was like put that in a reel, Sophie. Like yeah,
Oh God. So
that's
I
fucking
just
really good.
waffle. I'm sorry.
No, it was
Yeah.
perfect. That's
Yeah.
exactly the kind of shit that we do that people need to hear. Yeah, no, really good stuff. Anyway, no, really, really good. No, you're absolutely like spot on. I think that like, you know, it's such an interesting situation we have in Britain because when you make it as clear cut as that, where it's like, you know, the reason we're all suffering is because of money, it's because of capitalism, it's because of how the way in which like financial violence is exerted upon people. You know, it's actually finance that, well, if you want to call it finance, money, it's actually money that like causes all the violence in the world, like the most of it anyway. The sort of like the biggest, the most violent, horrible events are all to do with money. And you know, but people in Britain don't want to see themselves as that oppressed. They know that things are bad, but you have this like this insane thing in Britain where it's like people will just be like, "Oh, you just get on with it, mate. You just get on with it. You're not getting paid enough. Just get on with it, mate." And it fucking sickens me, man. It's just such a yellow-bellied bullshit attitude. Anyway, just wanted to take that little minute to just like rant against like how difficult it could be to empower some people in the UK. But yeah, talk to us more about like you know, the ways in which like people can make a difference now, because there are certain things that are being called for from actual Palestinians, from movements in Palestine. Talk to us about like what is being sort of like focused on at the moment.
Yeah, so first and foremost, keeping up coverage of what is happening, that is, you know, so important. Keeping talking about it sounds like such a basic and such a given, but people are being faced now a year down the line, those who are going, still as hard as they were, if not harder, than a year ago in terms of constantly sharing what's happening, videos of what's going on, images, fact sheets and things like that. They're being faced with that sort of pessimistic view that we were talking about earlier, which is that, it's been going on for a year. Do you really think it's going to stop? They're being faced with comments like, basically stop harping on about it. Like you've been going on about it for a long time, like over a year now. Like, why do you continue to share this type of information? There's also people that like are being met with this narrative of you're just depressing people by continuing to talk about Palestine, because why do I want to see a video of kids being, you know, in a hospital without limbs and things like that? It just makes me feel depressed. Um
Oh
and
no.
yeah, it's a wild thing, because you often, that's the thing, is like you're in a bubble sometimes in these activist spaces, and you have to give yourself a bit of a shock sometimes. You have to
Yeah.
actually like venture out into the real world, um and remind yourself that there's so much work to be done. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so a big part of that is continuing to talk about Palestine,
Yeah.
continuing to educate, continuing to share knowledge, things like that. I see it as like a spectrum. So going to protests, again, people are becoming a bit, the complacent is the exact word. They think, well, what's going to a protest going to do? Protests are just like a great way to pave the way to mass mobilization. Like the people that you meet there, the networks that you can build are just so important. I've met so many new people over the last year that I've been able to mobilize with. And I would never been able to do that had they not attended these protests and had we not been holding them, like as a coalition in Manchester regularly. Um,
Yeah, like
so yeah.
if you're thinking like a protest isn't going to achieve something, because there are regular protests all the time on this issue and it's not been solved, it's like, okay, great, go to the protest and meet people then, like go there and meet new people and like become part of something together. Because like if you're thinking protests aren't going to solve it, organizing is going to solve it, where are you going to find people who are vested in this
Exactly.
issue?
100%, 100%, I agree. Like so many members of different organizations within the coalition have been met through these spaces. Like had I not gone to these protests, I wouldn't have found out about YFP, you know, and then had I not found out about YFP, I wouldn't be here today. So it's all interconnected, you know. So that's the first end of the spectrum, I would say. If people are doing that and they want a little bit more, then I would say that, you know, there's, I say, an in between, which is semi-direct action, which is, you know, tackling these targets head on. Like an example is office crashes. So this is literally where we enter the space of you know, the office space or the business premises of a particular corporation. You know, BNY Mellon I mentioned before, AXA I mentioned before. Um, there's also, you know, other places that we've entered into over the past year. There was IO Associates, which were the landlords of Elbit Systems. You know, PAL Action had also, I believe at the time, like been targeting them. Oh, sorry, was it IO Associates or Fisher German? I always confused the two.
Fisher
Fisher
German is
German, I
the
think, were the landlord.
was the
That was it.
landlord. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
IO IO Associates were different. Yeah, I don't know why I always confuse IO Associates and
It's
I
because
think
they're
they were
nothing.
recruitment. I think they were
No,
recruitment for
yeah,
Elbit.
nothing bullshit
Yeah.
middleman company names. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, look, they just I think yeah, if I think IO Associates were the recruiters for Elbit and
yeah.
then Fisher German were the landlords. I've switched them around in my head. Either way, both of them were subject to that kind of those kinds of tactics. A mixture of semi-direct and direct action, office crashes, taking the protests to them, disrupting them, things like that. And eventually both of them cut ties with Elbit. And yeah, so semi-direct action is something that more people than they think can get involved with because there's often this kind of fear around it. Like, oh my God, am I going to get arrested for going into this space when they don't want me there? And a comrade of mine said it so perfectly. Because one time we were in AXA office and there was I think there's a video of it out there somewhere. I was doing a speech and this woman, this receptionist, was just not having it. Like she was coming up to in my face, like shouting, "You can't do this in here. You can't do this in here. Get out. Whatever, whatever." We ignored her and he said afterwards, my comrade, he just said, it's such a privileged thing to talk about permission and trespassing and things like that here in Britain, when in Palestine, and this company is complicit and participating in in what's happening there. In Palestine, there's no such thing. You don't have that privilege of like, oh, you're trespassing on my property. You don't Palestinians don't have those types of rights. So it rubbed us the wrong way that they were talking about, oh, permission and things like that. Anyway, going off on a tangent, that's something people can get involved with. We've never had anyone like you know be arrested for going into the office space because usually it's like it's a disruption tactic more than anything. um I was actually arrested um for on the you know the lower end of the supposed spectrum of activism. I was arrested outside of BNY Mellon for chanting, right? So you could yeah
For
like the
chanting.
yeah because we were outside BNY Mellon for like Palestine Action had hit BNY Mellon Piccadilly office, and we went there to kind of like as a coalition, like YFP and other people, we went to support them. Um, And we were chanting outside, like, standard things from the river to the sea. And then, yeah, like I just remember being on the mic and this police officer comes up to me whilst I'm chanting and she's like, if you don't stop that, we're gonna arrest you. And it was I just ignored, I didn't even give it the time of day. And then me and the rest of the group, we still chanted from the river to the sea. And not even a minute later, they'd grabbed me and put me in the van. And they left me, sorry. I was going to say us because there were people outside for station support, but they left me in there for about 15 hours or 14, 15 hours. Um, and it was funny because like I was in there from about 10 a.m., half 10, like they'd taken up, why do I keep saying us as if there was loads of people, taken me to the station. Um, and then yeah, it wasn't until about 11 p.m. that I had my interview. And then they still left me in there for another couple of hours after that. And then they imposed four bail conditions, which included I couldn't be in a group of more than three people, including myself. I couldn't be in the city centre. I couldn't be within 100 meters of any Elbit systems or associated premises or associated company premises. And yeah, the Palestine actionists that had been arrested that day, I didn't even know them. Like personally, I didn't even know them. And they said I can't have any contact with these people. So they actually gave me more information in the bail conditions about those actionists that I even knew about them beforehand. And yeah, those stayed imposed for about a month or two. And then we successfully. But the point is that I'm trying to make is that, in activist spaces, you should always be ready for something like that to happen, but you can't necessarily say that something is like, going into an office space is definitely gonna, end up with an arrest, and going to a protest will definitely never end up with an arrest. Like you can't ever say that, and you should always be prepared because essentially the police are a tool of the state. Like they're not representing our interests, they're representing the state's interests. So you should always be prepared for something like that to happen. But if we're talking about the spectrum of possibility, the direct action aspect is the most risky. And people who want to get involved in that, obviously the best source on it is Palestine Action. But there are so many ways that you can mobilize and get involved, that if you're not comfortable with taking direct action, that you can get involved with. And those are just some of the ways that you can: office crashes, event crashes, protests, things like that. Boycotting is a massive one. Calling for divestments from companies is a massive one. And these types of semi-direct and I'd say like non-direct or indirect actions that I'm talking about, they are also all focused on BDS, on boycott, divestment, and sanctions. They are all focusing on cutting the financial ties between Britain and the Zionist regime, no matter what these tactics are. And that is what Palestine Action operate on. They specifically hone in on Elbit systems because they've chosen that as the most effective target for them to pool their resources and aim those resources towards. So they are the most effective ever BDS, form of BDS I could ever think of, because they focus on a target, they just hammer
Exactly.
consistently, regularly those,
Exactly.
associated targets until they succumb. Yeah.
Yeah, because like there was a story that I think it was a front page story a little bit ago about like Starmer denying some it was a minority of weapons licenses to Israel as if
Yeah.
this was progress, right? And it's like
Yeah.
obviously it should just be
Yeah.
all of them. You aren't taking a stance unless it's all of them, right? Um, but if you think about it, the ones that he would have denied would have been the ones that were least profitable. And so it's just like then that makes it our job to make them all unprofitable.
Definitely. Yeah. I think it was about 30, 30 licenses from about 230, something like that. So it was a minority. I can't remember. I think I read something on campaign against the arms trade. I think it's called not I think it's called, sorry. I think they did a um like a list of what the licenses that were cancelled actually were. And they also, I think, stopped uh there there was this agreement, I think, where it was that it could just be like an uninhibited, like uh unassessed, like agreement for arms to be sent, certain arms to be sent to Israel, and then the government decided that no, they're going to actually assess, uh, in certain instances. I could be wrong, but that's from what I remember reading. So there was some movement on it, but it was a very like performative shift, and it didn't do anything to actually, yeah, impact the genocide, um, being stopped. So yeah, those are just some of the ways I would say that we could get involved.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it's just always just so based, just like, I think people look at Palestine action and they're like, yeah, well, smashing up a weapons factory is actually just the best thing to do, and everybody should be doing it. Um, but like, yeah, it's about like using what you could do and like, yeah, the actions that you feel comfortable with. And you might do an action and you might be like, actually, that wasn't scary, and you could do something that you thought was more scary after that. That's
Exactly.
how we learn and grow as people and humans, right? I think like another thing to think about in terms of like actions going forward is like the rapid way in which Israel is trying to drag the entire world into World War III is giving, I think, the movement like so much more momentum because of that sort of this unspecified threat of like, oh, what if Israel nukes Iran and then Iran nukes America and then America nukes Russia and all, people are doing these like mad mental speculative gymnastics to, actually make them think about the struggle. And I think that like is probably something that could be turned into a bit of momentum, because it's like, well, actually, if fucking losers in the Imperial Corps who never cared before are now scared for their own skin, well, okay, yeah, well, you should be doing something just fucking anyway.
Mm.
Um, but like, how do you feel about how that is like becoming more and more an ever present, and like things that you hear more about in the news, like whispers of things like the Democrats saying like, "Oh, I don't know about Israel pushing Iran. Like, you gotta not fuck with Iran, bro," and shit like that. Like, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I I feel like it was inevitable that it would come to this point, because, well, as we were saying before, like Israel has acted with such impunity, over the last, 76 years. And yeah, ultimately, there are other countries and resistance factions in the region, that, yeah, they've got to the point where they are able to be an actual, they constitute an actual threat against Israel. And this, yeah, this mental gymnastics that people are doing, I understand like where it's coming from, because it is a possibility that this, it's already got to the point where, we're Israel is acting with the same genocidal intent in Lebanon as they have in Gaza. They're using the same tactics, as they used in Gaza. So I feel like it was always where this plan of Greater Israel and expanding, the settler colonial project into Lebanon, into Syria, into Jordan, um, the Sinai Peninsula, with all of these aspects, like that, people who don't understand what the aims of the Zionist regime were from the first instance, this will come as a shock to them that it could become a regional thing. But for me and for people who have been, you know, aware of these types of plans for a long time, it doesn't come as a shock that this is a possibility. I actually think it was inevitable that it would get to this point that we are thinking actually it could end up in all out combat, and Britain at the end of the day, um with its deep rooted active participation in the oppression of Palestinians, with its the arms licenses that we talk about. I think it was 350, not 230. Actually, I just had a
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry. Anyway, just clarifying my lack of statistical knowledge sometimes is just absolutely crazy. But with its licenses and with its the normalization and with its academic institutions like completely entrenched and in this space of like making Israel seem like the most normal thing in the world, like all of that, and then people think it's a shock that Israel is becoming more powerful and pissing off more people in the region and more powers in the region, and therefore are surprised that that they're getting backlash from it, and that powers are actually rising up in the region and saying no. I
Yeah.
feel like that just indicates to me a sense of dissociation or like lack of understanding of what Israel's role actually is in the region and how
Yeah.
much of an enemy they've made of themselves to certain countries there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a spot on analysis of it. Like once you understand what Zionism is and you understand that it's fascism, you know that historically fascism is only one thing. It's about domination. It's about assimilation. It's about colonization. It eventually becomes empire, and that's how that works. And I've felt so fucking vindicated recently because I was talking on my fucking stream back when I used to stream. I was talking, it must have been about 8 months ago or something, about Greater Israel. And I've heard BB talk about Greater Israel so much. Like, they all fucking talk about Greater Israel. And, like, I've seen maps where it's like, it includes Syria, it includes fucking, Iraq, it includes, like, these vast swaths of the fucking Middle East, and it's like, I've seen that before, and people were saying, no, that's not true, bro. No, that's speculation, man. They just want Israel, bro. They just want Israel. It's like, bro, the definition of Israel is ever changing.
And
like,
you see,
ever
like,
changing.
it's like IDF soldiers with like patches on their jacket that have like the Greater Israel map, and it's like,
Yes,
okay,
literally.
like even if they don't have any like, like even if we weren't able to point to a specific policy or anything like that, this exists as like this kind of like like this thing that exists in the kind of like fascist kind of like mental kind of space or whatever, like it's absolutely part of the project, whether it's explicitly stated or not.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Let us move on to our questions. We've got some questions now. We got the last 15 minutes. These are some pretty good questions. We'll start with the first one. This one's from Valerie, the lovely Italian, who says, would you say Israel is entering a similar stage in its apartheid state that South Africa was in before it was dismantled?
I would say that with Israel and South Africa, there are similarities, but there are also fundamental differences. So, like with South Africa, that wasn't like an apartheid regime, um, to my understanding, rather than the settler colonial project that we see with Israel, and the way that the powers that be conducted themselves during the South African apartheid. I would say there again there are similarities, but there are absolutely fundamental differences between that and the way that the Israeli powers conduct themselves. So to answer the question, I would say to an extent, because there has been this shift in the people's mobilization. That was a massive part of bringing down the South African apartheid, which is people, reclaiming their own agency as, you know, contributors to this apartheid regime and saying no. We saw in Ireland, even though there was that group of supermarket workers that decided to go on strike because they didn't want to handle apartheid goods. And then that sparked like the first policy being adopted against the handling of apartheid goods in Ireland, like in the West. So like we are seeing common themes. People rising up against Barclays, like even, and Barclays was a massive player in the South African apartheid region, and people making that connection now. Again, I do think that in terms of the apartheid aspect of of Israel, yes, I think there's the shift in people's assessment of what Israel is. But in terms of it being as a settler colonial project, I think there's a way to go because there is a massive, battle that we have to fight. And so many intricacies, like the settlements, like enclosing Gaza and isolating it from the rest of Palestine, very deliberately. The plans of Greater Israel. These are things that we didn't really think. You can't draw like complete parallels when you look at South Africa. So yeah, in terms of the financial aspect and the people rising up and mobilizing, I definitely see similarities in that regard. The differences, I would say, more come to the whole aspect of like genocidal intent and ethnic cleansing as we are seeing it today. And as we've seen over the last 76 years, I think we've got a way to go still in that regard.
Yeah, it's hard to overdraw perfect parallels, right? Like history doesn't it's like it doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes or something is like that is the
Yeah,
same.
yeah.
Yeah. So the next question that we have is from Audrey Stardust, and they say explaining the Palestinian genocide and Israel's position on the world stage, I often get a lot of eyes glaze over or confused looks. I worry I'm not educated enough on the history of neoliberalism. Any thoughts from Masa on things I may need to educate myself on to be sure to emphasize? I'm just so confused I would need to say more than a genocide is occurring.
Okay, so the thing that I learned when I entered into activist spaces is that there are so many concepts and historical, like, you know, there's so much historical knowledge and like to even these terms like neoliberalism and things like that. I entered into these spaces and I immediately felt like, okay, I'm so not as intelligent as maybe arrogant me once thought I was. And I think we, by making it kind of a bit convoluted and talking about all these like concepts and phrases and things like that, I think we very, very almost actually end up playing into the oppressor's hands because we get bogged down in like, oh my God, it's so complex. Like, how do I explain this? How do I do this? How do I do that? When that's what they want us to do, that they want us to get so bogged down in all of these terminology and this, revolutionary phraseology and whatever it may be, that we can't actually connect to your average person. That's what they want. So I would say if you're explaining it to the average person, it depends on what you want to explain to them. If you want to explain, the whole history of Palestine, and then the most common example I always hear, which I always think is the most effective, is imagine someone came into your house, held a gun to your head, said, "You're going to live in the toilet now, right? Because I said so, and I've got the force and the military backing to say that." They shove you in there. They dictate when you can leave and when you can go back. And if you try to step a toe out of line, if you try and break free of that room that you've been put in, then you will be punished, if not killed. This is your house, right? would you not fight back? Would you not do whatever is necessary to free yourself, liberate yourself from that
Yeah.
situation?
I
Great.
saw that a lot in the
Um,
early
yeah.
days, like after October 7th, there was I saw a lot with other kind of I'd say people that are involved with like Maori politics, but like people that I would say considerably less left than I am, but people being like, oh man, like, like I just don't know if I can support after, like this, like Al-Aqsa flood and stuff, like saying, I don't know if I can support this. And I'm like, I remember saying to people like, man, like if they had locked us up in an open air prison the size of Kaipara, which is like a place here that's like considerable, comparable size. It's like if they had locked us up there for 6 months, we would have been doing that shit. Like we would have been like, like immediately, like it's to pretend like to see this and like condemn the people that have been locked in Gaza for most of them their entire lives. It's like no, it's the same as like the Haitian Revolution and everything like that. It's like, yeah, there was like a lot of violence in that one small period, but then we're looking at this like longer period of consistent violence for a long time. And it's like, like, yeah, absolutely. I just,
Reminds
yeah.
reminds me of that clip of when Kwame Ture is getting that he's at a Q&A and someone comes up to the mic and asks him like, I'm not sure about violence, like I'm not sure I can be okay with it. And like, how do you ever say that it's like justified to engage in violence? And he says like, okay, so if I was a slave owner and you were my slave, and the only way that you could be free is to kill me, and would you know, and there was a, my back was turned and there was a big rock, and like the guy just starts to walk away from the microphone, and Torre's like, sorry, I didn't hear what was your answer, what did you what was the answer to that, like, yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, it's
true,
like
yeah.
the only other thing is like, okay, well, so you wouldn't act like, so
No, of course,
you're
yeah.
just content being a coward, like,
Yeah.
like, okay,
No,
cool.
I saw something, and this is the silliest. Like everyone's given such amazing examples, and I'm gonna say a video I saw on TikTok, right? But I saw this thing yesterday, and it was about this man who two people had entered his house in order to rob it, and he killed them, right? Because this was in America, so it was, I can't remember which state it was in, but obviously it was legal to arm himself. Um, and he shot them and killed them in a really horrific way. And and so he was sentenced to life imprisonment. And I looked at the comments, and it was flooded with people saying, well, they entered his property. They fucked around and found out. This is a, and I was thinking, like, how are many of these people probably the same that would say that what Palestinians do to free themselves from
Mm-hmm.
oppression,
Yeah, absolutely.
not
Literally.
people that, even not
Yeah,
just in
yeah,
Gaza, across occupied Palestine. So if you're going to explain a genocide
Mm-hmm.
to
yeah, yeah.
people,
Like,
just don't get bogged down in all of this like intellectual
yeah,
terminology.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just put it in the most simple terms. Like these are massacres that are happening. These are people being slaughtered.
Mm,
For what? Why?
yeah,
And when the person that you're speaking with can give you a legitimate answer, which they will never, then you can potentially concede. But they will never give you a legitimate answer. They will never give
No,
you an
of
answer, a
course not.
response that would justify what they're doing
Yeah.
in Palestine.
Yeah, I as much as I hate to talk about posts and social media, like when October 7th last year happened, I immediately shared like, I wish the state of Israel are very finding out, because like it's literally that, like it's fuck around and find out, like it's any violence against the Zionist project is just them finding out. And obviously a lot of people were, this is anti-Semitism, don't you know, a bajillion dead babies, blah blah blah. Anyway, we have a couple
Yeah.
more questions. So B-Rat asked, is there any Palestinian artist slash author you'd like to recommend and tell us a little about?
Oh, my top one would be Ghassan Kanafani. Ghassan Kanafani was um part of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Um, uh, and he was an activist, a revolutionary, and we take a lot of inspiration from him in YFFP. Um, a phrase that we often or a quote we often use from him is as imperialism has laid its body across the world. Wherever you strike it, you serve the world's revolution. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say, looking into Ghassan Kanafani and his works, his literary works would be, yeah, really, really insightful. I would say, particularly his commentary. In the year of his assassination in 72, he was actually killed in Beirut by the Mossad, by the Zionist regime. And in the run up to his assassination, he actually wrote about airstrikes in Lebanon conducted by the Zionist regime and how the the media conglomerates were presenting this as like just another military tactic, and the parallel between that and the cyber attack that was carried out by Israel in Lebanon at the outset of its assault on Lebanon. Oh my God, it's as if he was writing right now. Like he is talking
Yeah.
about how Western media has effectively, downplayed this into just another military a tactic used by Israel in a defensive a strategy. And yeah, Ghassan Kanafani, I would say. Yeah,
Fantastic, thank you.
Cool.
cool.
All right. So, we got one more. We got one
Okay.
more from Audrey, who asked one of the earlier questions. Audrey Stardust asked. I actually have one more to add, and then they did the little emoji thing for the cringe face. They said, "I'm very interested in direct action, but struggle to actually find local groups involved in direct action. Is there better sources than just Googling?" Yeah. What do we think about that?
The best source is Palestine Action, unequivocally. Going on their social media, on their Instagram, looking into their training days, which they do host across different cities. That is the best source, in my opinion. And they would direct you direct you on how best to get involved in your respective areas because they operate across Britain. So I would say, yeah, Palestine Action is the best
Well,
source.
what you do have to remember is that we do have an international audience, unfortunately.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you would know,
Yeah, well, actually, Palestine Action. Oh,
would still be the right people to.
Yeah, Palestine Action US probably would
oh,
be,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
assuming they're American.
Yeah.
They've got in France, Italy. I think they just set up is it Norway or Netherlands? I can't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've got multiple, yeah, factions across the world. So yeah, I would still contact them regardless.
Buzzing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
that brings us to the end of our questions and thus the end of your fantastic interview that we've done with you today. Yeah, we like to. I don't know if you saw this when you were sorting things out before the show, but we like to give our chat some homework. I think I already know what the homework's going to be, but what would you say would be the homework for our lovely nerdy chatters to do? Go away and do.
I would say the given is obviously to get involved in as much mobilization as you can, by way of what we've discussed today. But I think I would add on a point, and this is from me as a Palestinian, is to um, look into Palestinian culture as well and identity, because we were a people before this, and we are a people, and we will always be a people. And this period of oppression is merely going to be like a dot on the pages of
Mm.
history, and when you do look into that dot, it will be how we broke free from oppression. So I would say, like, looking into Palestinian writers, like there's Fedwa Tuqan, who was a Palestinian poet. Mahmoud Darwish was another Palestinian poet. Ghassan Kanafani, revolutionary. I mentioned before, Basil al-Araj was another Palestinian revolutionary. These are all, no, I would say people that you should look into, and really just try and understand that, yeah, we are above all. We may be an oppressed people, but we are above all a people. And there was a quote I would end on by Mahmoud Darwish, which is على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة, which means we have on this land what makes life worth living, and that's what we're fighting for, because our life is worth living and Palestinian life is worthy of living, and that's why we resist. So yeah, it was Palestine, it will always be Palestine, and that's why I think, yeah, looking into Palestinian culture and identity is just as important.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me, and yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks.
See you now.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
What a quality show. That was
Fantastic.
really, really good.
Great interview.
Really, really enjoyed it.
Right. Time to remind everyone quickly that Red Planet is a show made possible by the support of our patrons at patreon.com/red_planet. It's been a bit of a tough year for us, and we would really appreciate people's support, in order to be able to keep Red Planet going and expand Red Planet and do more stuff, like the long-awaited Zad interview. It's been delayed, requiring us to, pending us doing another trip out. We are hopefully going out in January to take part in a big event there. And if that can be made possible by your support at patreon.com/red_planet. We also have merch available through mercenarycreative.org. We have a shirt, we have a tote bag. But if you go to the Patreon, you'll see various different tiers. We won't get into what all of them are. You can check them out for yourself. At the highest tier, which is called the Sickos, supporters get a personal thank you at the end of every stream. That looks like this. Thank you so much to our Sickos, JBP, and Risk Inverse. But
Thank
now, I want to know about the sickest sicko of all, DJ Mule.
It really could have been a toss-up.
I know. I
then.
left a little pause to let you both think. Oh, am I the sickest sicko? It's really Tim, but I'm throwing. It
is Tim. It is Tim.
I'm misdirecting onto Mule just now.
Cool. Yeah. Check me out, linktree.ee/DJMUEL. I got a new video out. It's done pretty well. I'm pretty proud of it. It's just it's about 2 or 3 weeks old now, to be honest. But yeah, it's newer than my older video. So yeah, go check that out if you haven't already. On my Patreon, I did a review of The Substance, which is the best movie that you might have seen. Maybe you've not seen. Not many people have seen it, and that's upsetting to me. Please go and see it. It's fucking phenomenal. It's the best movie I've seen in the last 10 years, maybe, in theaters. It was just absolutely incredible.
Big cool.
Oh yeah. No, I think that it's up there. Like Mandy was there beforehand. Mandy cinema
is
experience.
Good as fuck.
Oh yeah. I saw Mandy at Film Festival, and it was giant screen, the sound. It's amazing.
Yeah, what a cinema experience. But then The Substance was another level as well. Go and see The Substance. It's great. Yeah, you should. Go check me out. linktree.ee/DJMUEL. Tim, what about you?
Sorry, I was Googling screening times for The Substance. I gotta see it in the cinema, Yes, if you want to see more from me, so I'm on YouTube and Twitch as Conquest of Dread, but there's not too much going on over there at the moment. I've been really busy with other stuff. You can find me over on Twitter at Dread Conquest and Blue Sky as well. Some of the other stuff I've been busy with is making a tabletop RPG, which is very close to being done. I'm waiting on some behind the scenes stuff to come through before it can actually be kind of launched. But if you're on Twitter and you're into that kind of stuff, look up Dark RPG 2000. It's a kind of dark dystopian future class war kind of situation. Yeah, but what about Soph? Where can we find out more about Soph?
All my links are collected together at linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. I'm on some social medias, but I'm not on them that much. I'm living a life worth living. It doesn't involve posting all that much. It involves going to the trampoline park and the planetarium and stuff like that. Anyway, my Patreon is the main thing. Please go and support my Patreon. It is how I pay my rent and bills and stay alive. So please support me there. I'm working on a bunch of stuff and I want to quickly tell you about it. I know that we're running a bit over time, but I am working on a big project called The Mad and the Mentally Ill, which is about my theory, my kind of personal framework and understanding based on theory that I've read, my experiences and so on of madness and mental illness and what like mental health and also like kind of existential, well, the term is ontological security, like how everything fits together and how you get well in a way that helps you support your comrades. Like it's an approach to madness and mental illness and mad liberation for organizing and for being in community and supporting each other, right? Getting better is the most important part of getting free. I think it's something I say somewhere in there. That's a big project I'm working on that is going to be fantastic when it's done. I'm really excited about it. I have been working on a video about Aaron Bushnell for a while, but it's currently shelved because I need to take a kind of reapproach at it because of the year of genocide and how intense things are and just like different feelings that have kind of layered on top of the project as I've been going. I might make a video soon about half an hour long about a politician that I really hate, where I just talk about how much I hate him for a while because it needs to be done.
You should do that.
I sat down and put out like about 2 pages in one sitting where I was just like, I fucking hate this guy. And I'm working on something about misinformation in the internet, which has been a long time coming, because it's kind of my specialism, and the thing I know the most about is like misinformation, conspiracy stuff from a political epistemology perspective. So all of that and more will be available early to my Patreon supporters if you go to patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. All my other links are available through Linktree. I've got a Substack, Blue Sky, whatever. But most of all, please, if you want to keep me doing my work and staying alive through my work, then support me at linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. Thank you.
And that is the Red Planet.
Whoa.
For this week.
Whoa.
Yep. Cool.
Catch us next week when there's different things happening.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Right.
Bye.
We'll see you then.